I think I'll call a meeting for Planning and Zoning for January 6th. We'll call that to order, and we'll start, I believe, with a roll call. Laura?
Ms. Yoshimura? Here. Ms. Dean? Here. Mr. Mulcahy?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ferguson? Here. Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Spring?
Here.
Mr. Strike?
Here.
Ms. Barker? Here. Thank you.
All right, that's a roll call. So now we have the minutes, the next items on the agenda. We have minutes for November 18th, December 9th, and December 16th. Just refresh your memory that the one that was originally in the packet for December 16th has been substituted with, we got the electronic copy late last week, and then you have the corrected copy handed down the table. So discussion for minutes.
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes as submitted.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Any
Second.
corrections, any modifications, anything to them? Seeing and hearing none. Seeing and hearing none. Minutes are approved. All right, so now we move on to disclosures. Commissioner Yoshimura, you want to handle disclosures?
Certainly. Ms. Barker, do you have anything to disclose?
I'm on the wrong side. See, I was setting me up straight. I had not been seated on the commission, so I would not be voting on the resolutions for approval on the consent agenda.
All right. Thank you very much. And we'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the Planning and Zoning Commission. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Tyler?
None.
Robinson?
None.
None. Commissioner Strike?
On Resolution 2013-038, I would be abstaining as I was not seated at that time.
All right. Commissioner Ferguson?
None.
All right. Commissioner Spring?
I have no disclosures to make.
All right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dean?
No.
All right. Commissioner and Chair, Mr. Mulcahy?
Nothing this evening.
All right, thank you. And on the consent agenda item D1A, I have been recused from participating in that, so I will not be voting on that resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so speaking of consent agenda, why don't we move right on to the consent agenda? Do we have any items that we need to pull? Mr. Ferguson?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull items D1A, Resolution 2013-038, and item D1C, Resolution 2013-052.
All right, so if I read it correctly this session, and we only have one item on the consent agenda, anyone care to pull that one? If not, then I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2013-051, case 2013-145.
I have a motion. I have a second from Commissioner Robinson. Any objections, any comments? Seeing and hearing none. Resolution 2013-051 is approved. So, Commissioner Ferguson, you want to talk about the Resolution 2013-038?
Yes, this is the Chugach Access Plan Resolution. Just want to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music on this item. If you will turn to the second page, paragraph 5, the last half of that paragraph is a new paragraph. The Planning and Zoning, or PZC, is concerned with the lack of information and/or planning in regards to internal circulation with the park. Better internal circulation would serve to mitigate the impact to properties outside of the park. The Planning and Zoning Commission encourages the Division of Parks and Outdoor Rec to work on correcting this critical omission prior to the next annual report and/or plan review. With that single addition, I'm happy with the resolution as prepared. And
So, motion to pass as written.
yes,
You just wanted to highlight that.
Well, we've got two copies floating around here,
Understand.
and they're not distinguishable except by looking on that one paragraph. I just want to make sure everybody knows which copy we're passing.
Okay, I understand. So I have a motion to approve. You want to hit your thing so we can get a second up there? Thanks, Jim. And do we have a second? Commissioner Dean, do I have any other comments, discussion? Everybody all right? Any objections? Seeing and hearing none, resolution 2013-038 passes. So, Commissioner Ferguson, you're up again.
Yes, I am. Resolution 2013-052 is the West Diamond Boulevard Upgrade Phase 1. Since we took our action at the last meeting, we've received correspondence that the administration plans to proceed in spite of our recommendation. I would like to ask that we maybe send a memo in support of this resolution, pointing out the reasons why we objected to it. I think the reasons we objected to it are outlined in the resolution, but they somewhat get lost in the whereases and everything else. And I think it's important, and Commissioner Spring and Commissioner Robinson did a very good job, and I think they should volunteer to write an email in support of our resolution.
All right, so I understand the discussion, the memo. Why don't we deal with the resolution? So Commissioner Spring, you have a
Yes,
comment on the resolution itself?
Yes. I agree that the resolution was a little bit thin in terms of explanation as to why we rejected or did not approve the project, West Diamond project. And I have some wording I brought with me that would fill in some of the gaps and maybe, but now that Commissioner Ferguson mentioned the possibility of a memo, I'm thinking that might be a better means of doing it, because it's a little bit difficult to put complex thoughts into a resolution and bullet points, and maybe it would be better to do a memo. One other thing, too, I was thinking, what my concern is, the letter we received from the Public Works Department, the administration, as they mentioned, was written before they had the opportunity to look at our resolution. And it doesn't even appear that the letter even the writers of the letter even bothered to look at the minutes of the meeting, because I see very little direct addressing the comments that we made during the public meeting. It's kind of a generic letter rejecting the Commission's recommendation. It doesn't talk at all about some of our concerns about the phasing and the cost of phasing the project. It doesn't talk about the benefits that it would be with respect to having one design of the project, phase 1 and 2 combined together. It doesn't talk really much about why the Commission thought that that the project design failed to meet the recommendations contained in the bicycle plan, for instance. And one of my concerns was I didn't believe that the ADTs, the future traffic projections, were necessarily accurate, and I didn't see a lot of information from the consultants regarding the basis of those projections. So lots of those issues, I think, that we discussed, none of those were included in the letter. So they wrote the letter a little bit prematurely, in my opinion. What I would recommend after this motion clears is a motion to reject the letter from the Public Works Department and ask them to rewrite the letter addressing those concerns that the Commission has identified in the memo or the resolution.
Right,
Which is, I think, the proper way of going about the business.
So we can't have two main motions on the floor at the same time. So I have a motion made by Commissioner Ferguson to approve this as written. However, I understand from both Commissioner Spring and Commissioner Ferguson there'll be a follow-on motion once this motion is taken care of, some sort of motion regarding some kind of response to the PMEs. I have not got a second from Commissioner Ferguson, so I now have a second from Commissioner Spring. Commissioner Ferguson, you wanted to address your motion?
I think Commissioner Spring's done a good job. My only thing I would add is that, once again, they decided to put the design criteria manual on top of everything else, and I object to that. But I do think we need to pass the resolution first and then address our concerns secondly.
All right, seeing no one else in the queue, any further discussion on the resolution? Any objections to the resolution? Seeing and hearing none, the resolution 2013-052 passes. So, Commissioner Ferguson, let me clear you. Are you going to jump back in the queue here?
I'll make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission will write a memo to the Assembly addressing the concerns with the memo from the administration. I don't believe we've got the authority to reject it or send it back to them. I believe that our correct course of action would be to write an email to the Assembly addressing our concerns with their letter. I don't think sending it back to them would do us any good, so let's address it to the Assembly and go on.
So I understand we have a motion on the floor to draft a memo outlining our concerns on case, what was it, 53? 52, 213, 152, addressed to the Assembly, and I assume you'd be copied to PM, outlining our concerns. All right, and I have a second, Commissioner Spring. Commissioner Spring, you care to speak on that?
Yes, I support that motion, and I would volunteer to write the letter if I can get some review and editing from other members. It would be helpful. I would also like to, if I could, since it doesn't appear that the Commission will consider a motion to reject the letter, to include that in the memo, our concerns that perhaps the process wasn't faithfully followed by the administration, and that a letter rejecting our recommendations should have waited until a time when we had a resolution adopted, and they should address the concerns in the resolution.
I have no problem with it.
Commissioner Reagan? And I noticed Commissioner Robinson's trying to hide down there, but he's indicated interest in assisting in that memo. Is that correct, Commissioner Robinson?
I would be happy to co-author that.
I think we have several points we want in there, and I believe between Commissioner Spring and Commissioner Robinson, you captured most of the Commission's concerns. Okay, so we have a motion, I have a second, and we've discussed it. Any further discussion on that? Any objection to that motion? Everyone's all right? Left and right? Everybody's okay. All right, that motion passes. So we'll be looking forward to a memo, possibly a draft maybe next Monday? Outstanding, well done. Yeah, that was going to bring to the attention of anyone in the room. We are going to postpone 2014-001. You want to do that now? You want a motion? We'll go ahead and take care of that now. I have a motion for Commissioner Yoshimura, seconded by Commissioner Ferguson, to postpone case 2014-001, postpone until next week? Is that what that is? 113?
At the request of the petitioner.
At the request of petitioner. Any further discussion? I can't clear you out of there, Jim. Finally, you're gone. Any further discussion? Any objections? Seeing and hearing none, that case 2014-001 is postponed until next week at the request of petitioner. All right, I also need to bring up an issue off the agenda real quickly. Real quick discussion of the calendar. It's brought to my attention here on February 3rd, the first meeting in February, neither the chair nor the, what are you, vice chair, co-chair, assistant chair? What?
No, I'm the vice chair.
The vice chair. Neither the chair nor the vice chair will be here. So what do we do on that, staff? Help me.
Mr. Chair, you would elect a temporary chair at the meeting that evening.
That evening. So they all have to come while I'm on the beach in Mexico, and kind of where are you going to be?
In an
Undisclosed location. All right, so you guys want to talk amongst yourselves after this meeting and figure out who gets the honors on February 2nd?
February 3rd.
February 3rd. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes care. So now we're on to the regular agenda. So public hearing, we ready? So let me read the rules on procedure for public hearing. The procedure by which public may speak to the commission at its meeting is, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. They are petitioners, including his or her representatives, get 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representative groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., get 5 minutes, and individuals get 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights related to any action Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Any individual may request written findings from any commission decision within 7 days. All right, so that brings us now to case 2013-159 MEA. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for a conditional use permit to upgrade a utility substation. A case on this request was originally heard on September 16th last year under the case number 2013-123. This case is being submitted following denial of the previous conditional use request. Public notification on December 14th, 2013, 44 public hearing notices were mailed. 2 notices were returned unclaimed. 5 comments were received opposed to the request. 4 comments were returned in support of the conditional use request. This petition site is Lot 1, Park Subdivision. It's located on the west side of Steffi's Street and the north side of McKinley View Avenue in Birchwood. The site is approximately 2.07 acres in size, and a utility substation was originally constructed on this site over 60 years ago. The upgrade to this substation is being done in conjunction with a new gas-powered generation plant under construction in Eklutna to provide affordable and reliable service to MEA's customers. MEA currently depends on power generated by facilities at Homer, Beluga, and Anchorage, which are all owned by other utilities. The upgrade of the Park substation is essential to meet the growing demands for electricity in Birchwood, Chugiak, and Eagle River. Reviewing the 2006 update to the Chugiak-Eagle River Comprehensive Plan establishes a goal to provide public facilities and services that are located, designed, and maintained to accommodate current and future needs of the area in an effective, cost-efficient, and timely manner. So reading further in the update to the comprehensive plan, 46% of all land uses in 2005 are residential, which remains essentially unchanged from 1987. The existing substation has been in place over 60 years. Chugiak-Eagle River's population grew from an estimated few hundred people in 1939 to 2,229 in 1960. The population in 2010 was 38,168, and it is now projected to be 52,695 in 2025, based on a projected 2% growth rate. There are no specific conditional use standards for utility substations in Chapter 2150 of Title 21. The general standards appear to be met for the most part. The substation will be fenced for safety purposes. There will be no public access to the site. It is expected that maintenance vehicles will be on site once a month. There will be no impact on pedestrian and vehicular traffic circulation and safety as the result of this upgrade to the utility substation. There will be no personnel permanently stationed at the site. There should be no additional demand for public services. There should be no adverse impact on noise, air, water, or other forms of environmental pollution. Department of Health and Human Services has no record of noise complaints for the existing substation. However, they note operations of a larger substation may result in increased noise levels, which should, they advise that it should be taken into account. That increased noise level may require sound mitigation in the future. The site does not contain mapped wetlands, streams, or natural features that require further review and/or permits per comments from Watershed Management Services. The lighting at the substation will be low impact. That includes a 2-level lighting system. The first level will be security lighting used when the station is unoccupied. The second level is maintenance lighting, which is used and manually controlled by MEA personnel when ambient lighting is insufficient to perform maintenance operations. Now, the land use patterns are fairly well established in the surrounding area, comprised mostly of large lot, single-family residential. The upgraded substation is larger than the existing substation and therefore will have a greater visual impact on the neighborhood. During the September 16, 2013 public hearing, the Commission heard testimony that included the removal of natural vegetation from the petition site and the potential for off-site drainage that could adversely affect the septic system on the neighboring property. During deliberations, the Commission identified the following two concerns: the need for a legible drainage plan that shows surface runoff will not adversely affect adjacent on-site utilities, and the need for a landscape plan that will buffer the appearance of the utility substation from adjoining residential property. A drainage plan has been developed. A final drainage plan was submitted to private development, and it is included in the staff packet. The elements of the drainage plan are outlined on pages 5 and 6 of the report. The drainage plan concluded that the off-site drainage for this site will be the same in both the pre- and post-construction scenarios. The up-gradient limit is the power line right-of-way. The power line right-of-way is that the major right-of-way that contains the Eklutner water main as well as the main transmission line. Private development staff has accepted the drainage report, as all the comments on the site civil review have been resolved with one exception. That one exception is the conditional use permit needs to be resolved prior to final approval of the land use permit. Private development comments are on pages 162 through 163 of the packet. The items that have been struck through, which is all but one of them, indicate that the concerns have been satisfied, and I did verify that with private development staff when I discussed their comments. A revised site plan, a very thorough site plan, has been submitted. The substation will be enclosed with a site obscuring fence that will consist of a 10-foot high chain link fence with privacy slats. The fence will be placed 50 feet back from the north, the east, and the west property boundaries, and the fence will be set back approximately 160 feet from the south property boundary. Landscaping will be installed exterior to the fence atop a concrete retaining wall. 71 evergreen trees ranging from 6 to 10 feet in height are to be planted along with 218 evergreen shrubs. Sheet L7 shows that a 3-inch depth of topsoil and a no-mold seed mix are to be provided for all disturbed areas. Shrubs are to be planted at the base of the gabion wall, which is 6 feet in height. Trees are to be planted on the slope to the level of the substation gravel pad. Topsoil to a depth of 18 inches is to be provided behind the gabion wall for the trees. 21 evergreen trees are to be planted along the west boundary of the petition site. 70 shrubs will be planted along the base of the gabion wall. All trees along the west boundary common to the adjoining lot are specified to be 10 feet in height. Sheet L6 shows the landscape elevation from the west. It represents what the landscape or the viewscape will look like immediately after installation. It is true the 42-foot tall support structures are visible above the fence and tree line. As the Commission pointed out during the discussion of the previous case, mature vegetation does indeed provide a more effective buffer. However, the proposed landscape plan does exceed that which is required by current code. This is submitted under and being reviewed under the old Title 21. And under the old Title 21, given the length of the lot line, there would be required 13 trees, and 21 trees are being planted. They are all evergreen. They will not, obviously, they will provide a year-round visual screening rather than a mix of deciduous. And the buffer landscape standards do not require a specified number of shrubs, but certainly the shrubs will provide adequate ground cover. They were chosen for the fact that they do branch out and bush out and will provide continuous screening as growth proceeds with the landscaping. The department does recommend approval of the revised application and request for a conditional use, subject to the conditions that are found on pages 13 through 14 of the packet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any questions for staff? I don't see any questions for staff, so I think then we have a petitioner representative, sir.
Excuse me.
You have 10 minutes, and you want to reserve time for rebuttal?
A minute, if you please.
Just a minute? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
thank you. Thank you very much. Chair Mulcahy, members of the Commission, my name is Dwayne Adams with USKH, representing the petitioner, who in this case is Matanuska Electric Association. There are members of Matanuska Electric Association may be able to assist if you have technical questions. Mr. Joe Griffith, the general manager, also is here and may be able to assist if that's necessary. As staff did a very good job, I think, of presenting the case. It is an existing substation in a residential area, largely R6, R5A. There's some B3SL also to the west, and so to the south, actually, but highly residential to a great degree, large lots. The community generally grew up around this substation. It's been there for quite some time, over 40 years, perhaps as many as 60. With respect to this substation has done a very good job of serving this community, though there are continuing outages that are experienced. One of the problems is that this substation is aging, and as part of an overall network, it does not have the ability to isolate any parts and pieces, so if something goes down, it jeopardizes the larger system. There's a lot of improvements being done. There's a new generating plant being done, as you know, in Eklutna that will assist MEA in meeting capacity. And as you well know, sitting on the Planning Commission, this is Chugach Eagle River is the fastest growing area of Anchorage. This is where our capacity is going to have to be met into the future, and these improvements are needed to meet that. Now, part of this is certainly to provide better service to those 2,000 customers that are served by this utility at this location, but also to provide for the increased capacity that's needed. Also, it's necessary to provide what's called a ring bus system, a way that allows us to isolate this substation from the rest of the system so that if something goes down here, we don't jeopardize the rail belt utility, because this is a critical part of the overall rail belt utility. MEA is a very major partner in making all of our services work. If you look at the graphic that you have to your left, you'll see that where all these utilities come together at that crossroad mid-graphic, those are the utilities that come in and are served by this substation. It's absolutely critical. It's central. There aren't a lot of places to reconstruct that would provide for that service. We're really kind of locked into a location here. Certainly there would be the ability perhaps to look at other places, but then how do you pay for the transmission lines that would be necessary, the infrastructure to provide that, the easements to get the infrastructure in place, not to mention the acquisition of lot, and deal with also publics that would have to be neighbors to a new substation. So finding a site is not an easy thing. The components of this include, as what you've seen in your packet, there is an existing transformer that will be relocated to the north or to the east. There will be a new transformer that goes in and will be paired with this, a much quieter and up-to-date transformer. So there are 2 transformers, but again, they're located to the east, farther away from the residential neighborhood that we're concerned with. There will be high voltage terminations, but there will be no new transmission towers that enter this site. There are new structures that bring the utility in, but they are not towers as the 70-foot towers that are governed by Title 21. These are 42-foot towers. Those are the largest towers that will be at this site. Service lines will leave underground. We aren't proposing new lines other than what comes in right now that will be visible, but the towers are indeed a concern. And so when we talk about the impacts, we are talking about visual impacts primarily. The drainage is, as staff reported, has been resolved. We feel we have permeable soils on site. We're not capping this with asphalt, so most of the water, a lot of the water will be taken into the ground. That water that does drain off through the surface will be taken to detention and filtration basins to deal with that drainage. But certainly there are landscape aesthetic impacts that are attributed to any sort of a substation, a new substation. None of us wish for necessarily a substation in our backyard, but we do deal with the animal we have here. It's a substation, and it's hard to change that. We can certainly do things aesthetically. At this site, as staff reported, we're well above the standard that's being used in either the new or old Title 21 by a large stretch of the imagination. But we also note that there is an elevation difference between the one homeowner who is primarily affected. And there is one homeowner, and there is no doubt he and his wife are very close to this, and they are most affected. Very fortunately, there are not a lot of other properties that are directly affected. Certainly, some can look down to it, but those are generally rather removed from this, but the one homeowner remains. The utility has tried to work with the homeowner, and the fundamental issue is that it's just something that is not agreeable as a neighbor in its larger configuration. So what have we done? We've reduced the lighting levels. There are 2 lighting levels. There's a security light at the entrance, but other than that, the lighting will be dark. And if you were to look at page 57 of your package, you'll find that shows that there's very little incidental light beyond the very entrance to the site. There are other lights that are used on an occasional basis when maintenance required in the winter in dark conditions, but those are expected to be limited, with most maintenance actually taking place in the summer when the site is much more accessible. Landscape remains the key issue. We've talked about drainage. Landscape does remain to be the key issue. We think we've done what we can to address the concerns that this neighbor has. Certainly, I think you'll hear that he's dissatisfied with where it leaves him, but the utility has met 5 times now with the homeowner and his wife, those homeowners, and has, up to their utmost, tried to resolve those differences. So the question is then, what does this commission have to say, and what are the key issues? And the key issue, the test, I think Ms. O'Brien addressed, and that is that the specific requirements of a comprehensive plan have to be addressed, and she put those succinctly. Provide public facilities and services that are located, designed, and maintained to accommodate current and future needs of the area in an effective, cost-efficient, and timely manner. So the question is, does this do that, or can some other site do that? No. The answer is no. There is not another site that can meet the intent of the Chugiak Eagle River Comprehensive Plan that provides this in an effective, cost-efficient, and timely manner. Also, if we were to try to find another site, this commission has dealt time and time again with these neighborhood issues. Do you believe it's actually possible to find another site where at least one homeowner would not be affected? Could you find another site that would actually provide for the needs of the community while reflecting that there is some loss to individual rights oftentimes when public improvements are made? With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have some folks in the queue. Commissioner Dean, you want to start?
Through the chair, I had some questions of MEA and one of their officials. I had some questions regarding the problems that they've had with power outages in the past, how this equipment's going to help, and what the long-term goals are for this substation 25 years out, 50 years out. You're going to be there long-term, so just curious how you guys are going to deal with additional housing going in that part of the world, since it is going to be the future of Anchorage's growth. Is this substation going to need to get upgraded in 10 years, or is this capacity going to be enough for the community for however long you have planned?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Dean. My name is Joe Griffith. I'm the general manager of Matanuska Electric. The answer is this substation's upgrade will put it in good condition for the foreseeable future. I would assume that that's probably 30-plus years that it will be good for. If you end up with further growth of a large magnitude, then I think you're talking about additional substations in various spots out there. The transmission lines come into these big substations, the distribution lines go out to the homes and businesses, and that's the way it generally works.
Could you speak also to the power outages that you've had, say, in the last 10 years, and how this will change those power outages in the future with this new equipment?
The reliability of that entire system from literally downtown Anchorage, Plant 2, and clear over to the university area, as well as going to the east and north all the way to Palmer, is being improved by our plant first, and secondly by upgrading of these substations. There are really 3 on that main transmission line that runs from the Eklutna Hydro Plant to essentially Plant 2. It provides power to Anchorage. Eventually that power could get as far north as Fairbanks or south to Homer. The ability to minimize our outages will be improved by the new system. It just can't help but be. You've got power supplies closer, more reliable, a different kind of engines and generators at the site. So I think you're going to see a substantial improvement, although our statistics today are pretty good for outages, given that the snow comes off the trees.
Commissioner Ferguson.
I've got a question for Mr. Adams, if he could put the landscape drawing back up, please. I believe the homeowner in question is on the west side.
Correct.
Would you show that, point to that on that drawing, please? Yeah, okay. Not being concerned with the number of trees and only being concerned with that side, you've got 6 foot to 10 foot tall evergreens around the perimeter of that site. Am I correct on that?
Through the chair, Commissioner Ferguson, yes, but these are elevated behind our Gabion retaining wall, which I can speak to.
Okay, can you show me on that drawing that you just had, not that drawing, the previous plan view, please? Where is your Gabion wall? Okay. And is that Gabion wall serves what purpose?
Through the chair, Commissioner Ferguson, the specific intent of that wall is to elevate the plantings so that they're as high and at the level of the pad as we can get it. So, otherwise, because there is an 8-foot elevation difference from the pad to the base, roughly where the neighbor's yard is. And so the intent is to get these up so that we get an extra, in essence, 6 to 8 feet of additional height.
Okay. would the issue with the neighbor be better served if we were to take, I mean, you have got plenty of trees around that site by any count. If we were to reduce the trees, say along Stepper Street, and put taller trees on the west, would that better serve the issues we're having with the neighbor?
Well, the problem with plantings in this community is the larger the tree, the lower the survivability. And so 10 feet starts to press it. It's a quick point of diminishing returns as we get into the taller materials. As you know, our roots grow with pancake roots. They tend to spread this laterally very quickly because it's soil and water regime, so it stays right at the surface. So as a result of that, it's hard to find a tree that you can plant at an older age that is successful, because to get it in there, you got to trim those very valuable roots that are pulling all the moisture in. Thus, we deal with 610, and in a nursery environment, you max out at about 10 feet before you can actually even find them. And we're talking spruce trees.
Yeah.
Okay. It's very important to make that distinction.
I was wondering if going away from Evergreen, I'm just talking this one area on the west side, okay? I'm trying to address a specific issue here. Is there another non-evergreen species that would give us some cover for a part of the year that would work?
Certainly birch and, cottonwood grow like weeds. You can certainly get cottonwood in there. And
Cottonwood, I'd like
right,
to donate.
You're probably very familiar with cottonwoods. And so they certainly grow faster. The problem is they're not long-lived, and they have seasonal properties. What we're trying to do is get something in there that's more effective for the mayor year-round. So there's a trade-off there.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Commissioner Barker? Mitzi?
Would be me.
Yes, Mitzi, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, for the chair. I've got 3 questions. Since we're talking about trees and shrubbery, what are the species of shrubbery that you're proposing?
The shrubbery, John? What shrubs are you using? Cranberry. Using rose? Cranberry and rose, I know. I believe the landscape plan may have that. I've got it right here. It's on page 155 of your packet. And so there's red twig dogwood, dwarf mugo pine, prickly rose, and another rose in there. 155 of your packet.
Okay, so totally changing tack. Again, through the chair, Mr. Adams. Can you speak to what changes there may have been in the intensity of the substation's use itself over its lifespan? How has it changed?
To characterize the change from what it was to what it is now and will be.
Right. The report says it was constructed about 60 years ago, and surely we're not looking exactly the same equipment and technology that was there then.
No, the components of this are 2 transformers. There's a new bus that goes in and distributes the power. Also, there's an existing building, an existing transformer, and small short towers that serve for its limited load. So, facility-wise, it has these higher towers that'll go to 42. It'll have a new structure that'll sit there. It's actually not it's in a service module, if you will, like a Connex, and it's actually on site right now, which has been one of the concerns, I think, on part of many people is they built a structure, but they only had a footing and foundation permit. Well, this thing is loose. It's just sitting there much as any other structure would, and it's not founded at the current current point. It's not attached to the ground. So that's in there, and then there's a switching gear that's within the complex itself. So, there's the new service module that'll sit there, and there's also the electrical gear that's within it, and that's probably a 4 to 5 times increase. It will use a good portion of the additional acre that's there, whereas before it used about a half acre of space. It's now going to occupy another acre. Does that characterize it adequately? 1.2 total acres.
So the existing equipment, not the new
Right.
module that's coming in, how long has that been there on the site?
Since 1972.
And one more final question, again through the chair. What's the age of the residential development surrounding the site, the adjacent uses?
It appears to be 60s vintage, 70s vintage.
I believe the McNamara's have lived there for 24 years. I think so.
The zoning was applied there in November 2019.
Yeah, that was when the zoning was applied, but the structures were there probably long before that.
I couldn't hear.
It was rezoned in 1985. That's when the zoning took place, but I'm sure the structures were there prior to that. I met with Mr. McNamara once and was in his house, and my guess, it's a very nice house, well kept, and I don't know, it felt like houses I've lived in that were built in the 70s, maybe something along those lines. He could probably, I know he's here, and he can certainly address that better than I can, and he probably characterize the neighborhood better than I can too.
Thank you.
As far as who's been there, how long.
Thank you. No further questions.
Commissioner Yoshimura.
I have just a couple of questions through the chair. Do I recall correctly that MEA just advertised a rate reduction? So if that's the case, I'm wondering how this new equipment is going to be funded. Is it through a new bond or
It moves
rate
out of my
increases?
expertise.
Or
I'll let Mr.
Thank you, Commissioner Yoshimura. Through the chair, it's funded like all things we fund, with debt. We borrow every penny we get, and we pay for it over an extended period of time with the rates. We are on a quarterly rate adjustment process. That's why you see these ups and downs that happen. Every quarter it's readjusted. It was a small one last time, less than 1%, as I recall.
Okay, thank you. I have only one other comment to assist Mr. Ferguson with the tree situation, which is I was happy to hear the difference between the evergreens and the deciduous. Nobody thought that all those beautiful tall birch trees that were planted to the west of the new addition of the Anchorage Museum would survive, but they have, and they've grown, and they look great. And they are some 20 feet tall, and I think they only lost 3 or 4 of them over the first season of the winter season. So, Commissioner Ferguson, there's deciduous clump birch. That might be helpful.
Commissioner Strike.
This is a follow-up to Commissioner Ferguson's question earlier on the western side of the property here. What I'm understanding is that's a retaining wall.
To the chair, Commissioner Strike, yes, that will be a gabion retaining wall to elevate the plantings.
8
correct.
feet tall.
It's 6 feet and then it slopes up.
And
Yes.
And then behind that, the trees would be planted that you're planting. So the neighbors will be viewing a retaining wall primarily.
There will be undergrowth that grows up there. There are shrubs that will fall over it. So, and it is gabion retaining wall. It's not a big concrete mass that they'll be looking at. That's why the shrubs are part of the plan.
Okay. Another follow-up question is how much of the work on the substation has been completed? The work inside the gate, inside the fence, so to speak.
Inside the fence, The MEA received a footing and foundation permit. They did clearing. In essence, the clearing limitations are an acre or less, and they purchased the adjacent lot. They cleared slightly less than an acre. They then received a footing and foundation permit, which also provided for the grading and excavation permit as part of that. They received that permit. They worked all within that. The footings and foundations were placed. One of the things that I think was particularly bothersome to the community is that there are some pretty heavy-duty grounding rods that are required as part of the installation, which were placed in the minds of MEA. It's all part of the earthwork and part of the footing and foundation. It's nothing that's going to be appreciably above grade any more than the footing and foundations were, and that was installed as part of the work as well. And there was some consternation about whether that was beyond the footing and foundation permit, and caused quite a bit of consternation, and MEA was shut down. We still don't know what the determination was by the municipality of Anchorage with respect to why that was shut down. We don't have an explanation, but MEA complied with that, did shut down, and the work relates to that footing and foundation permit and the fill and excavation that went with it.
So in looking at the pictures that have been provided, is it a fair statement that what work remains on site outside of your fencing and your landscape plan?
What work remains?
What work remains?
There's the structures that go in, the transformer movement. There's still some footing and foundation work to be done. All the landscape, of course. Does that capture it?
So it's a fair statement, you're far from complete.
Yeah. Introduce yourself.
I'm Gary Kuhn, Director of Engineering. Most of the work remains to be done. Only the partially footing and foundations have been installed so far. We shut the work down. There's still some foundations for some of the bus structure that needs to be constructed at a below grade level. The grounding system needs to be completed and then covered. And so I would characterize the work to be done as about 10 to 15% of what's required to be done. We basically stopped when you asked us to.
Commissioner Spring.
Yes, so this might be a question for the staff of the utility. In the application, you state that this is partly substation upgrade is needed partly for safety reasons because the old utility substation is 30 years old. But on the other hand, there's some growth projections that you cite that also seems to be a critical part of this need. Can you explain what your growth projections are? Because first of all, I don't know what the boundaries are for the utility that you're serving with the substation, and I don't have really any information regarding the growth that you had projected on here.
Like all good utility practices, we have a long-range plan, and in that long-range plan, we look at 15 and 30-year horizon projections, and so we're looking at a pretty modest growth of about 1 to 1.5% for our system to grow, which has historically been true for quite a number of years. Not true in the mid-'80s when we were growing really fast, but today, on the average, that's what we look at. So when we completed our long-range plan in 2010, we looked at the area of projected growth. This was one of them. And like Mr. Griffith said as well, we're also looking towards future substation sites in the Eagle River area to accommodate growth in conjunction with what this substation will provide. So we're consistent with a 30-year plan and have accommodated the growth for that.
If I could just follow up. So I know that I've worked on projections for Eagle River myself and Chugach area, and I think 2% is probably pretty accurate for the next 20, 30 years probably, but it's no doubt going to vary quite a bit from one part of the Chugach River area to another. So I'm concerned, I guess, about where the growth that within your service boundaries you expect this to occur. What are the hotspot growth areas that you need to serve in the future?
Well, I think probably Mr. McQueen in the audience would be better help me to project where the growth is. His organization, Eklutna Inc., is certainly involved in a lot of the development and growth in the Eagle River Chugach area, and I don't have a crystal ball. I just tell you what I see from an engineering perspective, and we are looking at this area around the Park substation and around the northern, the southern Chugach and the northern Eagle River area for the growth.
I guess I don't have, I guess I can't answer my own, I'm not satisfied with the answer, I guess, since you don't have the information. Maybe somebody could help clarify it a little bit more detail.
Perhaps you could ask your question a different way, unless, Joe, you want to take a stab at it?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Spring, the growth level that Eklutna has been involved in is a good share of it in just to the north and west of Eagle River. The most wide open spaces are in that Birchwood Chugach region, and that's where the growth seems to be in that area now, I would say. And the Eklutna CEO is here, and he certainly would have some guidelines on where they're seeing development. And
I think I would like to hear more from him. You're right. Eklutna is going to be the hot spots, obviously, because the majority of land is owned by it. And there's, I don't know if where the boundaries you're serving, so I can't really estimate whether some of these hot spots are going to be within the area that you're serving. Like, for instance, the area around, Mirror Lake Middle School, which has a substantial amount of land owned by Eklutna just north of there. That will probably be developed in 30 years, I'm assuming. There's a lot of good land there, but there's no current plans for that area. The 770 area, which we've dealt with recently on another case, seems to be another area where could be developed in 20, 30 years. Powder Reserve, obviously, is the current hot spot because there's active subdivisions in that area, and I would expect that to be the near-term growth area. So are any of these areas within the boundaries of the MEA service area that you're trying to serve?
They all are within our boundary areas, yes. Our system starts just to the north of the way station and proceeds to about 3 miles north of the Chulitna River, 15 miles north of Trapper Creek. It's an area that's 200 miles long almost.
Oh, so it's almost the entire Chugach River area.
Well, this substation will not feed that, but the 3 substations that are available in the Eagle River Chugach region are all heavily loaded today. And to some degree, the outage instances we have are caused by the fact that they're old substations that never were maintained properly. Till I came aboard MEA out there a few years ago, there literally was no work done on maintaining the distribution system. They lived entirely off of the work that was done years ago back in the mid-'80s. Well, it's time to fix it now, and that's what we're doing. And if you add a big generation source like the Eklutna plant that's going in, and you guys probably ought to come out and look at that, it's worth the tour. That's a huge change to the whole situation in the rail belt. And that's why these substations need to be upgraded and done properly this time. The new equipment that'll go in there that Gary indicated, another transformer that's as big as from here to the wall and 15, 20 feet tall. So we're not talking trivial equipment, and breakers that are 10 feet tall, and getaways, the 42-foot structures they talk about, carry the power up so you can get it to the lines above there. You have to keep it away from people, as you can imagine. So yeah, it's a big construction effort that's underway there to support the needs of the community in the future, as well as to ensure that the that we do not put that new plant at risk. That's $315 million worth of brand-new equipment. So that's what's afoot here.
Commissioner Ferguson.
I have one question. I don't know who to direct it to, except I know it's not a Dwayne. Approximately, how many customers or how many meter bases will be served by this plant?
About 2,000 right now, Commissioner Ferguson.
And in 15 years, what number do you think that will be?
3,000.
And that's meter bases.
I would, yes. And if the gluten is more efficient, it will be greater than that.
And I could say 2.5 people per meter base?
Roughly, yes.
Okay, so we're talking about 5,000 to 7,000 people being served by this station.
And the businesses. It's not just residentials.
And also, I mean, we've got a Klutna that's being built, your power plant. Chugach Electric and ML&P just completed a big power plant here in Anchorage. We've got the Kenai or Homer Electric did the Nikiski power plant. Then we've got Homer Electric also doing a Soldotna power plant. So I mean, there's a bunch of new power plants being built along the rail belt right now.
That's true. Replacing equipment that was put in the late 60s.
Or building additional capacity also.
Not really additional capacity. We are at the limits of the capacity of the system today, and you're dealing with equipment that's 30% more costly to operate than what's going in today. You can almost fund the new machines with the savings compared to the old ones.
Thank you. No further questions.
Hey, Mr. Adams, I had one real quick one. I saw your answers to the questions, but there was a question from the public concerning setbacks, and looking at the diagrams, if they're on there, my eyes are too old to figure out the setbacks on your diagrams. Could you show us on your map there the setbacks and why you've got it that way?
The setbacks are 25 feet everywhere except the front yard, and that's a 50-foot setback, is simply put. So
the front yard being
to your right is the front yard, and that's 50 feet off of Steffes Street. And then every other side, the other three sides are, well, the other two sides are 25 feet. And I believe this, the south side,
south side was like
160 feet. It's quite a bit. That's a sloped area, and so that's 160 feet.
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with the area, so yeah, there's nothing to the south. You're pretty fine. So really, the concern is the west side. Is there any way that setback?
There's 25-foot setback.
If that could be increased to 50, what's the ramification? Would it make any difference? And
if it were increased to 50,
yeah,
it starts cutting into the equipment. Simply put, I direct you to the site plan. See if I can get there easily. If you look at probably sheet 48, I think, of your package, that shows the infrastructure that's in there. And part of what's important there is circulating around the site. There needs to be the ability to get equipment around the electrical infrastructure.
So the setback is the fence line, and then from the fence line to the actual first piece of equipment would be what? About how far from the fence line to the equipment?
It varies on the western side.
Yeah, the west side is the concern.
Yep. See, I don't see a scale on that particular drawing on sheet 48.
I thought it was just my eyes. Okay.
Oh, no.
But based on what you're saying, so your plan will reduce, based on your studies, your plan is going to reduce both noise and light.
Yes, the noise, again, the transformer is being moved to the east, so that's a pretty substantial difference. And the transformer that's being added is significantly quieter than the existing
one would hope.
So that's one thing. And the light is it's a security light is to get into the facility, and it's not much different than you might find in a residential situation.
Right.
And it also, I would add, is on the east side away from the neighbors.
Thanks. Ms. O'Brien, did you have a comment?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify the setbacks in the R6. This is a corner lot. It's adjacent to two dedicated rights-of-way. The primary front yard is 50 feet. It runs along McKinley View. The secondary front yard is along Steffi Street. It's half the depth of the primary, and it's 25 feet. And then there's two side yard setbacks along the north and west are 25 feet setbacks. The fence line runs along the interior setback line, and all of the required yard setbacks are exterior to the fence.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any more questions for you, so you've saved a minute for rebuttal. So now we're open for public testimony. Is there anyone who wishes to testify? Please come on forward. And let us know if you're speaking on behalf of yourself or an organization and your name.
Good evening. My name is Jill Flanders Crosby, and I'm the co-chair of the Birchwood Community Council. Thus, I am speaking for the Community Council, and I will most likely take my 5 minutes. First of all, I need to ask you if any of you received the corrections to the errors in your staff report concerning the Birchwood Community Council stance and the meeting that took place between Bill Starr, Amy Demboski, and the McNamaras at their house. Because we sent in the corrections last week. I do not see them reflected in the print, and I did not see them reflected online. All right, let me continue on because we will address these. So my testimony is going to focus on first reiterating the Birchwood Community Council response inclusive of the concern of the degradation of the public process, and I will also provide an overview of the timeline of how this case has unfolded. Subsequent testimony after myself will detail aspects of the timeline and reveal inconsistencies in both the public process and in submitted reports to date. As incorrectly documented in the online staff report and as I saw in the printed report, BCC did pass a motion at our October meeting opposing the MEA project until community concerns could be met. There were major concerns about the manner in which MEA has handled the project, the scale of the expansion, inadequate plans for drainage, and the expansion's visual impact. Concern was also raised that work was continuing, albeit from the right-of-way with a right-of-way permit, but nevertheless work that moved forward this project even though this commission denied MEA a CUP in September. We do recognize that there is an existing substation on this property under review, but we emphatically stress that the scale of this project is significantly different than the existing substation, and the public process was egregiously compromised. On that note, I want to briefly outline the history of what has transpired as my 5 minutes allow. In late September 2012, MEA did do a canvass of neighbors inside 500 feet, but they did not have blueprints or diagrams. When neighbors questioned them about what the substation would look like, it was answered somewhat vaguely, along with the comment, well, there's going to be a public process 60 days prior to any construction. This was never followed through on. By the second week of October 2012, the lot was clear-cut with no permit, even though this lot is over 2 acres. During the summer of 2013, a short plat erased the lot line because MEA bought a second lot. So the short plat erased the lot line, and MEA submitted the application for their CUP with a summary report, but as you know, no drainage plan or landscaping plan. In the meantime, on August 22nd, grubbing began, which is when Mr. McNamara, the neighbor, and by the way, this is not just a neighbor issue, this is a community issue. Our community is very concerned. It's not just the McNamara's. So Mr. McNamara, on August 22nd, 2013, began to become aware of just what was coming down here. And then he contacted MEA, and on September 10th, 6 days before the first P&Z meeting, is when he saw the blueprints that finally disclosed the height of the 40-foot towers. On September 16th, this commission denied the CUP due to the lack of drainage plan and lack of landscape plan. However, following this meeting, Mr. McNamara noticed that MEA was still working 7 days a week, 14 to 16 hours a day. On September 23rd, MEA met with the McNamara's, Bill Starr, and Amy Dembowski, where MEA walked out on that meeting after suggested revisions were made by Mr. Starr to the site plan. On September 26th, the drainage plan was submitted, referencing a Galder and Associates study, and Mr. McNamara will specifically address on the problematic assessment and the inconsistencies in this report. In the meantime, Mr. McNamara's conversations with Bill Starr and complaints to Jack Frost in permitting, there was a stop work order for a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock on September 27th. But by Monday, September 30th, MEA was back. Mr. McNamara discovered MEA went in to the 8th floor with a right-of-way permit. Work continued until the 20th, but this work concluded bringing in a crane on the right-of-way, picking up a switch house off a flatbed truck, moving it over the fence, putting it on a foundation.
Can you conclude,
although
please?
the argument, I'm at the end, the argument was that because there's wood between the switch house and the foundation, it's not on a permanent foundation. There's more I could go into.
We have some questions. Commissioner Yoshimura?
Did I have 5 minutes? All right. Really?
I broke it. I would have several questions about your timeline, so I would ask you to
ma'am.
continue, please. Thank you. But
All right.
with brevity. Thank you.
I'm almost done. So what I was going to say is there's actually more I could go into, from the lack of proper public posting for the second hearing to the manner in which BC was first contacted about this issue. The last thing I want to say is we do not dispute that upgrade work needs to be done. However, if they had followed the public process, perhaps they would not be in the position they are right now, with thousands of dollars of work committed and an angry public. That they have committed and spent their money in such a contentious manner should not be on the backs of the community. And I would argue that MEA did not follow best practices. Thank you. And I am willing to take questions on the timeline.
Commissioner Ferguson?
I have in front of me a Birchwood Community Council, apparently minutes as of October 23rd, received by the MOA on December 30th. Is this the correction you were referring to?
We actually submitted our comments before then, and they should be in the original packet. And why the staff report said we did not pass a motion when our comments were submitted, I think December 16th. We did send an email December 30th asking, why is this incorrect in the staff report?
I'm not asking for the history. Is this the document you were
I
asking?
would have to take a look at it. Do you want me to come take a look at it?
And recognize most of us throw away the packets after we have testimony.
Yes, that is, but this was submitted much sooner.
Okay, is this the document you were questioning? So we have the document.
You do have it, yes, sir.
Thank you very much. No
You're
further
very
questions.
welcome.
I don't see anyone else in the queue. Thank you very much. Anyone
very
else prepared to
welcome.
testify?
Thank you very much. My name is Kevin McNamara, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, staff. I'm the individual on the west side of the lot I have several concerns and can answer many of the questions you have, but I only have 3 minutes. In securing the drainage report originally submitted by Galder Associates, it was interesting that the report was done in 2010, and within the first half a page, they were already referencing tower structures. So even in 2010, we knew on that report there was going to be towers built on site, yet when MEA approached us canvassing the neighborhood, none of that information was offered to us. But nonetheless, the Galder Associates cite two different things. They did 2 test boreholes, both of them on the east side of the existing substation, well off of the premise where they're currently building the new pad. They cited that the expansion for the Justin Park substation will go east and south. This project goes north and west, totally different direction. The entire report goes on, and I can't say that I can cipher all of the mathematical figures that are in it, but they go into the depth in citing the types of soil they find, the concentration level of moisture in the soil. They go on to say that there was no water pumped out of the test sites, 2 40-foot holes, when they were drilling. There's no water on the east side of that lot. The house that was on that property was there for a reason on that side of the property, because it's dry. The entire build that goes north and west is wet. My house is built up on a pad system. My septic system is a mound system. My house sits up, the designer that built it put the whole structure up on a mound because that entire back field was wet. My children used to hunt frogs in that backyard, is how wet it was. From day one, there were actually 4 wells drilled, one in each corner of that build site, and I'm assuming for the grounding network that's going to be installed in that pad. The 2 wells that were drilled on the west side of that property, from the minute they started drilling wells, they were pumping water out of a 6-inch hose as they were drilling those holes. So there is water evident at a very early depth on those particular sites. The issue that I have with the entire Alaska Rim Engineering report basically cites the findings from Galder and Associates on the other side of the lot. It has nothing to do with the west side of the lot. The challenge that I have is before they clear-cut this lot, any natural rainfall we had some of it was absorbed by the natural vegetation, the grass, the trees, the shrubs that were existing on there. Not 100% of it infiltrated down into the water table. I have an extremely shallow water table, and that is my concern. As this water runs off of this lot, it then soaks into the ground. 100% of it is going to run off the lot. My 3 minutes is up, and I apologize for rambling.
We have some people in the queue, so Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, could you tell me how much did your mound system cost?
Ma'am, I didn't put the house in. The house was built in 1985, okay. And I know the individual that built it. But again, that's how I know the existence behind the land. The original house on that property was on the front side of the lot by White Birch Road, because it's actually dry out there.
Okay, I was just curious because I know mound systems can be pretty spendy. Do you know how big your drainage field is? Is it very large?
I'm sorry?
Do you know how large your drainage field is for your septic system?
The drainage field itself is probably, it runs off unfortunately, to the northwest corner of the property. It extends probably 50 feet out towards which would be my northeast, and then it covers an area probably about 40 or 50 feet wide. The depth of it, I'm not sure. I don't know how far down the individual excavated in order to haul in. He hauled out and then brought in fill, and that accommodated. So I don't know the depth of it, but the width is probably 40 by 50 anyway.
And your own personal well at your home? You're on a personal well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. How deep is your well? Do you know?
The well is 147 feet, and it's in the front of the property.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Ferguson.
If you could summarize where you were headed briefly, I would be willing to allow you that or encourage that. You were on a roll.
I guess I was on a lot of roll, but the challenge that I have with this whole thing is I guess twofold. Part of it is the visual effect of it, because as you tried to point out earlier, a 10-foot fence and 10-foot trees is not going to help the 42-foot tall structures. I get to see 35 feet of that entire mezzanine over the top. That project is 128 feet wide across the back of my property. I have a two-story house, and my living quarters is on the second level. From my back porch, I'll be looking over the top of that 10-foot fence and those 10-foot trees. That's my issue. Certainly the other side of it is, as Commissioner Dean pointed out, to replace the septic system would be pretty expensive. My challenge is, it's on the back of the house, my well's in the front of the house. If that septic system fails, where do I go? I don't know. And certainly that's a challenge. But the issue is that the records, both the Galdern Associates and the Alaska Rim Engineering cite that there's very poor infiltration below 7 feet. That's not very deep. So when you get 100% of the water running off of that site into the northwest corner, as they both cite, that's the direction of the flow, that's 50 feet away from my septic system. 100% of that water is going to go to this collection basin. Okay, the collection basin is designed to do what? Hold the water till it naturally dissipates down into the soil. Where's it going to go when the infiltration rate's only 7 feet deep? Not going to go very far. The site also reports that the expectation of the infiltration rate is 3 to 4 hours. I've got photos showing standing water for 30 days, never moved until it froze. It's under all this ice and snow. When they drilled the wells, the 2 corner wells on the west property, on September the 27th, on October the 28th, that water was still there, never moved. Probably evaporated into the air, but it didn't go down into the ground. So there's the runoff. If they do this French drain in the collection basin, we're stuck to the same thing, same issue.
Can you point out on this picture over here would probably be the best? Can you point out your house, please?
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure everybody understands everything. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Robinson?
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. McNamara, the letter that was referenced earlier was from the Birchwood Community Council, indicated that the council wanted to oppose the project until concerns are addressed, including effectively addressing neighbor concerns. And I wonder, you've talked about the drainage, and I don't think we're going to resolve that here right now, but from a visual standpoint, you've pointed out the problems, and the petitioner pointed out the problems on how you actually address it. In your mind, is there any way to better accommodate the facility that's proposed at this site through mitigation at that particular location? And if so, what would that mitigation look like?
Well, the original concern that we had, or the original presentation of this project when the neighborhood canvas was done, that it was going to be similar and doubled in size. Similar, the old substation covers an area of about 2,500 square feet. Similar in size and doubling would be making it basically 5,000 square feet. The perimeter of just the structure of this project is going to be close to 30,000 square feet. The perimeter fence they'll be putting around this thing is 49,000 square feet. To me, that's not doubling in size. And so if this thing was smaller, I mean, we are not subject or not objection to maintaining the infrastructure. The irony of the whole thing is this substation does not service my house. It services everything east. So my house I don't benefit from this substation, but that's the way it goes. But had we discussed this project, had we had this information in September and October of 2013 when they first did their neighborhood canvass, we wouldn't be here. I might have lost then. I might have won then, but we would have had that decision made long before they spent millions of dollars in infrastructure putting this thing in. That's the challenge, where I don't have the money to compete with them based on what they have put on there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe you heard it, Tyler. I didn't hear it. I'm moving forward. Is there a way that this can move forward? I mean, substation size, assume for now that that is engineered to be as compact and as appropriate. Maybe there can be some tweaking with some actual positions on there. But is there any other mitigation steps that can be taken to meet your satisfaction, or is this just, are we at an impasse?
We're basically at an impasse. If this project goes through, I move. I mean, I have, there's a lot of other issues behind this. One of them I spoke about the last time.
Okay. Commissioner Yoshimura?
Well, I do recall many years ago when I was developing a piece of property and there was concern about the fact that wells might run dry, and it makes me think of your situation as far as drainage is concerned. And one of the things that we did to mitigate that, over strong objections by the developer, quite frankly, was the establishment of an escrow fund to protect those wells. And so I am thinking about that type of situation for protection for for your septic system, because I can see the difficulty in the runoff and the challenge that you might have with your well being having to maintain 100 feet. What is the size of your lot?
I have 2.5 acres.
So you would have room to replace the drainage?
Not necessarily, because due south of my house is the same property line as the substation is on. It heads uphill. The top of the hill is rock. And so to expand out, I have a limited surface in my backyard. Yeah, I could go out to the other corner of my lot, to the southeast corner of my backyard, but then I'd be eliminating the rest of my backyard that I'd have for the sake of a septic system. And I understand and thank you for your recommendation, but certainly one of the other challenges that I have, and thank you for the opportunity to ramble. 100 feet from my back door are two 42-foot tall towers on 10 feet of fill above mine that are eventually, if I stand in my backyard, they're 52 feet tall. The top of each one of those towers that are 28 feet wide each are three 115,000 volt lines coming in and exiting back out of that, 100 feet from my back door. And again, the effect on the electrical impulse, is we can argue that all day long. I'm not going to argue that. The challenge that I have is my wife is a 3-year breast cancer survivor, and trust me, she doesn't like the fact those power lines are back there 100 feet from the back of my house. And that's one of the conditions that we have to deal with, and I'm not going to allow her to be tormented by those for the rest of our duration in that home. Thank you.
No, I don't see anyone else in the queue. Thank you, Mr. McNamara. Anyone else care to testify? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for coming down.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to cover the clarification document that you put in there, because I didn't want to use
your name, sir?
Bill Starr.
And how you spell that?
With 2 R's, but I'm not sure who I'm representing, and I'm proud to say I represent the community. So if that gives me 5 minutes, that would be fine. But there is the correction that I have in particular about the dialogue that occurred, and that's on your comments on page 4. And I know that there was others, as the staff packet does its best, I think, to be accurate. But I don't want to sway you in listening to what I'd like to communicate. And one of the challenges that I had coming here tonight was, how was I going to do it? And I felt that there was 2 ways. I could have done it with the emotional and perhaps just the downright angriness of the topic that I've come up with. And that's not a good way. It's a passionate way, no doubt, but it isn't the best way to move towards what's best for our community. And I think that's what we're both here to do. In your body, it needs to produce solutions that work, and I think that's your primary goal. Without a lecture, I've been there. I've done what you do. In fact, it was my cutting of teeth to move on to other things that were as equally as important. So I think the second way to approach it is through the measuring of the project from the criterion that would be practical. And clearly, as you go through your systems here every Monday night or however many Mondays you deal, there's the conditions are met or the conditions of standards that are prescribed inside of our codes and the elements that staff does. But I guess I'd like to have you look at it from a more practical sense of some of that. And you need to have perhaps an understanding of the site as I've seen it from walking it, from flying overhead, from touring it with the community and even some of the MEA folks. Page 156 is a good page for you to reference in your packet, as well as page 136. What I do when I measure by some of the processes and systems and challenges that we have, both from the assembly and when I was there, we look at it, can this site handle this use? And I think the idea that on page 136, you look at just how tight you're trying to put all of this into, remind you the zoning is important too, R6. You're coming into an R6 zone. Granted, it's been expanded, but you're trying to put industrial equipment in a residential neighborhood. It's tight. Can the site handle it? A criterion, a measure that's not as part of the standards have been met. This one is, can it handle it? It's too tight. 100 feet from back door of any residence. And mind you, there's more than just the McNamara's residence. Look at the maps. There's other houses nearby. It's surrounded by R6. Has the design considered its surroundings? No. 52 feet off the back of a residential house. Is it conducive to the neighborhood? And I guess that's what really got me angry initially, was the insult to the neighborhood from a lot of different perspectives. And I'm trying to not go there, but is this what you would want in your backyard? I guess would be the criteria of the measure. Are there alternatives? Yes. There are alternatives. Across the road, across the glen, behind the school, sandwiched between two busy streets. I'll summarize, but I think you've already been here once. This body in particular said no once before. The conversation and the staff packeting seems to be that this is a continuation hearing. This is a brand new number. Basically, it's the same answer. It's still no. And I think the idea that you're going to hear is that there isn't another alternative, there isn't the options because they've already committed to doing the work. They already went in there with heavy dollars spent. Too many.
We have some questions for you, sir.
Fine.
Through the chair, no, I was just going to ask Assemblyman Starr if he had further comments that he would like to make.
I was trying to get that in there so you didn't have to go over.
That's helpful, and I appreciate that because that's a helpful dialogue. I'm trying to bring it back to the specifics of the measure that would say why a no answer is the right answer. There are alternatives. There's high tower lines that cross over the glen. I think it meets their need to put expansion substation towers in here. They're talking about industrial equipment. Mr. Griffin described proudly how big these things are, and I appreciate that, but not in anybody's backyard, not in this residential neighborhood. We need to find a site, and I think there are some that can move that in for further growth and be less intrusive. They buzz, they hum, they make noise. There's trucks and traffic coming through there. Again, is that something that you would want in your backyard? I certainly am offended that it wants to go inside of a 50-year-old residence. A small switch tower, such as this moss-covered building under switchgear that's prior conditioning, is a good piece of infrastructure to have. And I can understand that, but the concept that you've communicated to the community that you're going to upgrade your site is sort of a misnomer. It's not an upgrade to a site. This is a brand new substation. So don't be swayed that it's sort of trying to take that. They're ripping down all that stuff. They're maybe putting an additional transformer in there, but there's high tower lines that are going to be brand new and tall. So get your arms around what is actually being built. I have, Ms. Domboski has, not only at the urging of the community and the residents that spoke to us initially, but just because that's what I do. I think you do it well. And that's the idea that the decisions you make up here make good community. And there's dollars expended. There's no question that they've moved forward and put some infrastructure in there. But you're looking at a dialogue that Ms. Dean started. We're talking 50-year payback. They finance it. We need to get this right. And if you had a 50-year investment, then let's take some time, step back from the process, and invest in the right places. I think we can find those. Staff knows about them. I know my community well. We can surely come up with that and move that. I referenced to page 156. You're not going to mitigate this with that. in any form, any trees. You still got that, put leaf-based trees up in the wintertime, you're going to look at those towers. I'd like to do that. I'm pro-build myself. I reached out. After I saw and heard of your first no vote on the topic, quite frankly, I felt frustrated that we couldn't accommodate them. But when I dug into the topic, facilitated a meeting, it was, again, why I'm directing you to page 136. Spin it. Move it. Put the high towers towards the front of Steffes. Put the buildings back. Do something like that. The flexibility was gone. And that's why Yukon Tanner and Mr. Brown got up and walked away, because they didn't want to have that conversation. They said, absolutely not. We're there. Let's talk to a higher power. Go with that higher power. I left the meeting and called Mr. Griffin. He called me back a couple weeks later, but we haven't spoken. We haven't done the work yet. And I think there's still work that can be done. I'll help you find an alternate site. We can't mitigate this one. It needs to go back to an R6, put a residential community back into play, and that. I'll summarize. It's in the wrong place. There's other areas, and I think the idea that you had the courage last time to say no, do it again. I think that's the right answer. It's okay to do that. We'll backstop you. We'll be there for you from both the community development and the dialogue that will occur with the ramifications of no vote. So I encourage you to have the courage for that. It's no easy task. I've been there, but there'll be a day after this, and we'll work it out. So, thank you.
We have some questions for you, sir.
Sure.
Mr. Ferguson, sir.
I want to get an answer to then direct this. What is the height limit in an R6?
Through the chair, Mr. Ferguson, height is unlimited in the R6 district.
Okay, and
Under the old code, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is there a height restriction under the new code?
Yes, there is.
It's 35 feet, I think.
And this thing meets the setback.
Do you mind if I elaborate on the setback just a little bit?
Go ahead.
Well, because I feel like we got schnookered a little bit on their definition of setback. From some definition, they want the entrance to be off of Steffes. And if you look at 136, it has that definition of a cul-de-sac, 136. And now they're talking about the back of the lot being off of another street that'll probably never be built. I think it's called, what are you calling it, McKinley?
McKinley, yeah.
McKinley will never probably be built. You have a cul-de-sac turnaround at Steffes. That is the street. So somehow or another, the back of the lot, for the purposes of the setback, the 50 feet, is being interpreted as off of McKinley, when in fact it should be off the back of Steffes.
I think it meets it either way. I understand, and I got my interest up when they said the McKinley.
Well, the 50 feet doesn't apply to the back. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but if you look, the setback's not 50 feet off the west side of the lot line. It's 25.
Right, you're correct. It's on the west side. But what I'm pointing at, I'm trying to get to, is whether the structure, whether it be an apartment house or something else, would meet the R6 definition. And the second point, where they're looking at that, they have to tie into their high-tension lines someplace.
Sure.
And these lines are millions of dollars a mile to build. And there's right-of-way acquisition, and there's a lot of issues. I'm not qualified to design it or select a site, but I've got to believe that they've taken a lot of what we've said into account. And earlier, we voted to reject it based on the fact that we did not have a grading plan, we did not have a drainage plan, we did not have a landscape plan. We now have those. And so I agree with the anger in the community before. But I mean, this is a new submittal, as you pointed out, and I'm trying to deal with
I understand
the
that.
submittal on hand. But
Well, I will comment a couple things. I don't think that diligence has been done on all the available sites that could perhaps meet the criteria for the high tension lines that require to go into that. So
that is not a due diligence or an issue that we've undertaken with other owners. We don't sit here and say, on this subject, have you looked at all these other sites? And I try, and I think the commission tries very hard, to treat everybody equally. And we don't ask cars,
Sure.
do they have have they looked at this other site or anything else?
Well, in due respect, I think the idea that you're talking about a residential six-zoned lot is different than perhaps somebody that's talking about a B3 correction or an alternative to the placement of that. So the broader-based discussion is that this is already a developed community. Somebody was talking, Mr. Spring, I believe it was, about where the future growth is going to be. This is an established development. I think it would be safe to say that there isn't going to be this level of growth in this community. There are one-acre lots and always will be that all the way to Birchwood Airport. Perhaps a little bit of industrial development at Birchwood Airport, but primarily you're going to see development to the south and back way to the north up near the power plant development. So I think there's 2 points that you raised. One of them is the mandate, perhaps, but I think that the utility isn't like a auto body repair shop or something like that. It has major impact and really should, I believe, go through a higher level of discussion. Partly before it occurs, it would be helpful.
Okay. Do we have an answer from staff on R6 height?
Under current zoning, there isn't any, but under the new rewrite, it's 35.
That's correct.
Okay. No further questions.
Commissioner Dean.
Through the chair, I have more problems with some of the churches in my neighborhood with their traffic and their not really being a part of the community because they use their buildings so little. In this case, it is a utility substation that isn't going to have a lot of traffic. Would it be possible for the utility, they're spending gobs of millions of dollars to make this happen, to buy a couple of the properties around their substation to give themselves a buffer? It is necessary to have a substation. I hate to move them. It's been there a long time. It's right on the main power grid. You know, there's a lot of benefits to being where it is. Picking up and moving a substation isn't the easiest thing in the world. But I don't know if anybody has discussed that to give them more of a buffer. I mean, they'd have less investment in buying a few properties than the equipment they're going to be bringing to the site.
And philosophically, that sounds okay. For me, it just degrades a neighborhood. It's a culture you're talking about, and I think that's the idea that, you know, especially the folks that have been here a long time, you know, I'm saddened by that because they'll probably pick up and move, and they won't just, they'll leave our community. And I guess that's my passionate statement back to you, is that I wouldn't want to put the folks there or in and around the box. And that's partly why I'm here tonight, is the degradation of those communities. It's the people in them, and it's as much the structure and the quality of life, but it isn't intended to be a lecture. I don't want to have the folks to have to move because they'll leave. They'll leave our area or they'll leave the state, quite frankly. And that's not a solution for me. They did that. They actually bought a lot and tore a house down and combined that, but that's as far as they went. So it's frustrating. But I really would urge you to enjoy this discussion about an alternative site. I think that your due respect, you're being put into that box because of the level of investment that they already pursued. It's a drastically different site from the moss-covered small box low-line deal to what they're proposing. It's not the same.
Yeah, the new site is only 2 acres. It's not that big of a site.
What they're asking to do on it, though, is massive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yoshimura.
I have a couple of questions for staff, and the surrounding area is R6, so is there a buffering standard that is required from an R6 zone to this particular property, and what is this particular property zoned?
This property is zoned R6, through the chair, Ms. Yoshimura.
Well, is that a permitted use? This is a grandfathered?
Use.
It's a conditional use.
It's permitted by conditional use.
You know, I've been told most recently that a conditional use where the underlying zoning is not compatible, that it has to have a rezone before it can have a conditional use. Did I misunderstand something?
The property is zoned R6, and in the R6 zoning district, utility substations are allowed. By conditional use.
Are allowed, in R6 are allowed.
By conditional use.
By conditional use, with no buffering standard?
There are not standards for specific standards for utility substations. And generally, buffering standards are required when it's, for instance, say, a commercial district adjoining a residential district. The burden of placing buffer landscaping is placed on the commercial district. They don't talk about uses, buffer uses for uses. It's generally, the code talks about a more intense zoning district buffering a less intense zoning district. So you've got R6 adjoining R6, and what they're doing now, because I looked at the buffer landscaping standards to compare the landscape proposed to what is required under the buffer landscaping standards, is that the number of tree plantings and the shrubs, the number of shrubs is not specified in the buffer landscaping, but the number of trees out 10 foot on center would require 13 trees to be planted, and 21 trees are being planted along the west property boundary that adjoins a residential use, but it's the same zoning district.
Right. So the loophole really is that we have an industrial use allowed in an R6 zone without establishing adequate buffering between the types of use versus the zone itself.
Yes, there are not specific standards. There are not specific standards for a utility substation. There are the general conditional use standards that deal with traffic, environmental, and compatibility is one of them. And under compatibility, the landscaping was required to try to mitigate the impact of the utility substation adjoining a residential use.
So do you have any idea how many utility substations exist within the municipality of Anchorage that's in an R6 zone?
Through the chair, Ms. Yoshimura, I don't.
Does anyone here have any idea? Okay, thank you. Maybe.
Well, I think the idea is what you're talking about here is clearly the question in front of you is it's not an allowable use. That's if it was, you wouldn't be taking the question up. It's not a permitted use, and it's not administrative approved use. So the idea that they come and they ask for conditions of using this property essentially is what you're doing. And so you're saying, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't do this. And I would offer up, if you do tend to move towards a affirming vote that they can use the property, it's highly appropriate for you to specify the conditions that it's done under, meaning increased setbacks or some of that. They've offered up a vegetation solution, which I've already stated I don't believe will work, but that's how this thing works, is they're already pushing the zoning use into uses because this is what they're faced with.
So thank you so much. I don't see any more questions. I have a question back for...
And 199 is also a letter that I wrote into your packet too, so I know it's a big one. Thank you.
I have a question back for staff, and I apologize. I probably should have asked this during the staff presentation about the zoning, because on the front, on page 1, it says it's R6, but if I read it on page 2 under related case information, it says in May of 2009, the Assembly approved rezone to I2SL. I'm a little confused on that now. What is the actual zoning, and what is, if it is still R6, then what is the related case information referring to?
Oh, that, Mr. Chair, that is the rezone of the gas-fired utility, gas-fired generation plant in Eklutna. And I put it under related because it's related to
thank you.
Utility substation.
Thank you. Anyone else care to testify? Any other one testify?
Hello. My name is Debbie Osiander. I live about 3 blocks from this site. I am here principally tonight because I'm pretty unhappy with the process, both from MEA and from the city, where we are right now. I participated heavily in the development of the Eagle River Comprehensive Plan, and I want to read you just a couple of phrases from the Eagle River Comp Plan that I think are significant here. We should encourage site architectural signage and landscape designs that complement the scale and character of existing and planned development. We should preserve and enhance the identity of established neighborhood areas. We should consider the character of adjacent developments in site plan layout and building designs for new development, and the Muni may even require layout and designs to incorporate the function and aesthetic character of adjacent development. There was a lot of discussion when the Eagle River Comp Plan developed about infrastructure. And particularly, I would alert you to page 39 of the Eagle River Comp Plan that calls specifically for supportment of development of regulations that would require electric utility companies to address the aesthetics of high-voltage transmission towers and inform impacted communities about future upgrades to high-voltage electric transmission lines and towers. And high-voltage transmission lines, particularly in residential areas, they requested that these be buried if economically feasible. It's been my experience that there have been a lot of concerns, particularly in Birchwood, which is a long-standing residential neighborhood. I've lived in it since the early 70s. I've walked Steffes multiple times, taken my kids up to the elementary school. The residential area was there prior to the substation going in. It's a very established, over 50-year neighborhood. I believe we need substations, but I believe they need to fit in with the neighborhoods where they're going. And when you're in a residential neighborhood, you need to pay attention to the neighbors and make sure that you don't negatively impact them, both visually, aesthetically, and infrastructure-wise. There was inadequate comment and communication from MEA about this project when it went in. I talked to numerous people who said they were told, oh, it's going to be really similar to what's there now, just about double the size, but pretty similar. It's not, folks. It's not at all. If they had told me that, I would have said, go for it. But this is a significant change, and you have a responsibility if you vote to approve this conditional use permit to make sure that the conditions you put in it are enough to cause it to be integrated thoroughly with this residential neighborhood, and they're not now. There are some specific recommendations I'd like to make if you'd
We
like
have
to
some
ask a
questions in
question.
the queue, so if you might get that question. Commissioner Yoshimura.
What would be your specific recommendations, and and also how could the process that we have been exposed to be improved? Thank you.
When you go to the community and you ask them if you have an objection to a project, the community has an objection, you have a responsibility to be completely transparent and honest with what you're actually going to do. I don't think that happened. I attended the presentation at the Birchwood Community Council, and I don't think it even thoroughly happened there, though there was some improvement. So hold developers' feet to the fire. I know some of you are developers and have experienced that and have done some excellent presentations that I've heard. This was not the case here. I think that it is really important to consider visual impacts. Mr. McNamara's property, I think, is going to be decimated personally. I don't want to sit and look at a big retaining wall myself. We need utility substations, though, but in this case, one improvement would be to go with the requirement that's on every other R6 lot that you have a 50-foot setback in the rear. It is not true that McKinley View is ever going to be a street. If you walk that area, there is a steep upgrade, and there are natural springs in that area, plus there's a utility right-of-way along McKinley View. McKinley View is only going to be 1 block long right by the church. It is never going to go further. That 50-foot setback in the rear is absolutely in the old Title 21, in the new Title 21, and it was a strong outcry from residential people both on the hillside and Chugach Eagle River to retain it. Keep the 50-foot rear setback, which is on the west side of the property by McNamara's. That's number one. Number two, put a specific noise limitation on this thing, so that if they exceed that, I think it's 50 decibels at the property line, that they could face sanctions. Number three, make sure that the drainage plan is thorough enough to encounter the natural spring areas. I know Birchwood. Birchwood typically has a high water table with spring areas sort of interspersed throughout. So you can have fine drainage in one area, and then you go a little bit further and you see a spring area. There is a spring. I have to wear my rubber boots when I walk the right-of-way ease line on McKinley View between past White Birch. So staff, there really are natural springs in this area, and I can show them to you. We certainly heard from Mr. McNamara about catching frogs in his backyard, and that doesn't happen unless you've got wetlands. So make sure that folks, so many of us have to put in these elevated, thank you. And it's expensive to do and it's hard, so please help us protect that. So that's another one. I really worked hard on Title 21, and I know a lot of you did too. And folks, you know, I thought that we caught things, but my gosh, I thought I knew what a utility substation was until this project happened. And I based my knowledge of utility substations on that one in Steffes that I knew real well, and another one that's down off the end of Jayhawk and Birchwood, both on R6, and both of them are fine. But if we're going to say utility substations of 3 to 4 acres with massive land clearing are permitted in residential neighborhoods, then the furor you see here is going to be just a minor bubble compared to what you're going to hit if something like this comes up in Turnagain. Folks will go ballistic. I appreciate very much that they're paying some attention to light pollution. Birchwood, Chugach Eagle River people don't like big street lights. We don't want them, and so I think that that's a positive thing. I think those are my main points. Give me 1 second, if you would. I think that's it, except, Mr. Spring, thank you again. I appreciate your knowledge of Chugach Eagle River, because the growth that's coming is not going to come in Birchwood. There's not going to be any water or sewer infrastructure there. The growth that's going to be coming is in parts of Chugach that Eklutna owns and in parts of Eagle River. But I don't know the service area of this substation. But I do agree that it's necessary to have them, but for goodness sakes, make them fit in their neighborhoods, folks. You can do it. Any other questions?
Yes, we do. Commissioner Ferguson?
I think she addressed my questions.
Okay.
Quick one, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Starr seemed to voice some optimism about alternative locations with your experience. Do you share that optimism, or?
I don't know. I haven't looked. I know they didn't look because of cost. They owned this one, and so it sort of implicitly made sense to use them. I don't know. I haven't talked to them. I have only been peripherally involved with this, but I have been deeply involved with the Eagle River Comprehensive Plan, and this thing really, really stretches it, folks. And I'm pretty involved with Title 21, and I think we're stretching that one too.
Fair enough. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to testify? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner. Talk to Ms. Osiander.
Commissioner, I had a question for staff, actually.
Okay.
I wanted to take a break.
Let's let Ms. Dean.
My question of staff is, at the beginning of this hearing, we were told that there were letters or memos back to you guys in support of this particular project. I believe there was 5 in support and 5 5 that were in support and 4 that were not in support. I was looking for the ones that were in support, and I couldn't find them in the package, and I was just curious if you could tell me where those were.
Through the chair, there were 5 opposed and there were 4 in support. They were received and they're included in the supplemental comments.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Ms. Dean? I am being strongly urged to take a recess here from Commissioner Yoshimura. Do I have a second on that? Are we okay with that? I have a second. So why don't we take 10 minutes? Apologize, folks, but it's been a couple hours already. We had a work session. So we'll take 10. We'll be back.
Hello, members of the Commission. I apologize. I have a cold, so please bear with me if I lose my voice. My name's Amy Domboski, and I'm one of the representatives for Chugiak Eagle River on the Assembly. Originally, this has been an interesting experience for me because I believe absolutely in public process. I believe in the role of our commissions and the power of our commissions and our general government, our Assembly. But with that, part of what makes it so powerful is transparency. And one of the things I saw first on with this project is I talked to multiple community members that were approached by MEA. They were told very clearly that this was a project that was essentially going to double in size. You know, the station that's there now, essentially it'll be 2. And they asked for more information. They asked for explanations, drawings, tower height. What exactly does this mean? And they were clearly told that before any construction, 60 days prior, there would be a community meeting. And that's what the residents counted on. Well, my meeting with MEA and the McNamara's and Mr. Starr revealed that the project manager indicated, well, yeah, we know we said that. We also know the project was similar. It's not. We said we'd have a community meeting, but instead we decided we didn't want to deal with the community council. We'd rather deal with the planning department in Anchorage. That's bad public process. That's bad process. You know, and the community really feels like this has been a bait and switch. And I hate to say that, but that's what it feels like. And it's not just Birchwood Community Council. Mr. McNamara had indicated, you know, that yes, this is going to in fact impact them. It's not just one community, because I can tell you from sitting in a Chugiak Community Council meeting that was packed, there was probably 50 people there. No, they didn't pass a resolution. Their president also is a past board member of the MEA, just to put that on the record. But there were a lot of residents in that community council that were horrified at this process. So I just want to point out that this is more than just one family that's impacted. This is setting the tone for how we develop our community, not just Chugiak Eagle River, but Anchorage. How are these developers going to move forward? How are they expected to engage? The other things that I want to point out, Mr. Ferguson, you had indicated, you know, one of the reasons this was initially denied was the drainage plan. And I would submit to you, sir, that the drainage plan, which is being put forward now, is predicated on data from the wrong side of the lot. It was predicated on data from the southeast corner, which is high and dry. I've walked this property at least 8 times myself. And I can tell you that the north corner is far different than the southeast corner where the data was given from. So I think just based on that alone, I think the Commission should really take a hard look at the drainage plan itself, because quite frankly, I think it's woefully inadequate. And initially...
I think we have a question for you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Yoshimura.
Have additional comments that you would like to make?
I will, and I'll try to make them brief. The other thing I want to point out is it wasn't until I got to this meeting tonight that I heard MEA trying to build up the new power plant and how this is a part of the new power plant. At all the community meetings I've had, the meetings that I had with MEA, never once when we were asked if this was something that was indicated for the new power plant, they never indicated that was the case. So I would just submit that to you. And lastly, well, 2 points. First one is about noise. When this first started going on, I was really trying to research it and figure out what was the size and scope of this. I'm a very visual person, and MEA indicated I should go out and look at the Reddington plant, which is off KGB Road. And I did. The thing is huge. I opened my car door, and it's not in a residential neighborhood. There's probably not a house for, I never saw one, probably a mile. But I opened my door, got out. Immediately I felt the hum. I heard the hum. And I was probably parked 50 to 60 feet away from this thing, and all I heard was and I could feel it humming. So when we talk about the size and scope of this thing, this is not, as Ms. Oatsander indicated, this small thing when she was developing Title 21 that she envisioned with a substation. This is a large industrial complex that's being shoved into a residential neighborhood. And as a representative of the area, I can tell you, not just from the McNamara's point of order, but at community council presentations where this has gone back and forth, I was pulled aside by state senators, representatives that are all saying this is a completely horrific process. They couldn't believe this is happening. So this is something that is very concerning. But the beauty of this is this commission, as we talked about allowable use and conditional use, this commission has the power to inject a little common sense into this process. This is not an allowable use. It's only allowable if, number one, they get a conditional use permit, but also it's only allowable if they meet all the conditions that the commission sets forward. So I would just submit that this isn't a slam dunk just because the law says this. It's obviously indicated when the law was drafted. This was never intended. But just as the Assembly has the power with with conditional use permits, with liquor licenses and everything else, there might be a zoning that says, yeah, you can put a liquor license here, but we then take we look at it with a common sense lens and we say, okay, does this make sense? Should we really put it here? There's already 5 others here. Or does this fit in the characteristic of the community? And to that community characteristic, we shape the project if it can fit. And if it can't fit, then it's denied. So that's why I say, I hope that the commission uses discretion. I hope that we can move forward. And as these things come up, I hope that developers will come to the community with accurate information, be forthcoming, and present it so we could mitigate some of these factors, because I think there were solutions early on that we could have tried to help mitigate some of them. But unfortunately, as Mr. Starr indicated, when we started talking about what he could do at that particular site to try to make it better, MEA left the meeting. So it was unfortunate. But this heavy-handed development, the Matsu Borough pushed back against it, and I think we should as well.
I'm not seeing anyone in the queue. Thanks, Ms. Nabowski. Appreciate you coming down. Anyone else care to testify? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Karen Perry, and I live, I guess it would be to the south of the property. So when somebody said there's nothing south of the property, I take offense to that. Sorry. But thank you for taking your time to listen to our testimony. I'm quite dismayed at the egregious way that MEA and City Hall have seemingly worked together to thwart this public process. As you've heard numerous times tonight, MEA canvassed the neighborhood, and I think someone asked, why are there only 4 or 5 comments against? Because they didn't give us any information. How can you be against anything when you have no facts, no diagrams, no blueprints? I also have grave concerns, as did the P&Z, and you guys, most of you were here, when Commissioner Parks in October clearly called out City Hall for continuing to allow this project to move forward, despite the fact that P&Z unanimously voted not to approve the conditional use permit back in September. In fact, the behavior of City Hall was so egregious that Commissioner Parks asked for the Commission's comments to be presented to the City Hall attorney. This Commission, as you well know, is the second most powerful board after the Assembly, and it would seem to me that City Hall should have some respect for your volunteer time and hard work and should submit to your authority, not to look for loopholes to work around you. According to page 11 of papers submitted by the City Hall, conditional use number 3 listed noise, air, and water and other forms of environmental pollution says this standard has been met. I disagree. They actually contradict themselves. On page 11 it says, quote, noise levels may be reduced with addition of new transformers. But on page 12, it goes on to say, quote, however, operation of a larger substation may result in increased noise. When we bought this house, or we built it actually, it took us 2 years of canvassing Birchwood Loop before we settled on this property and bought it. We have spent 8 years raising 5 children and working out of our home and building a little bit every year, a little bit every year, a little bit every year, because that area of the neighborhood and that area of Birchwood is so important and so valuable as a rural, quiet neighborhood. And I actually did wake up one night with humming in my house, and I went all over the house. What is it? Is it the refrigerator? Is it the boiler? What is humming? It was nothing. The kids had no music on, nothing. I figured it had to be MEA. So for them to say they're going to put in whatever he said this mega transformer in is going to eliminate noise, I don't really believe that. I think it might potentially be terrible. I'm also found some information about lighting. There's supposed to be 17 30-foot poles with high sodium pressurized lighting. In the past, it's not on now, but there's been one light. And our bedrooms for our home is on that end of the property. And I can see that one light through our bedroom windows in the back. Now they want to put 17 30-foot poles. Now remember, they already elevated this property 10 feet, so that in essence makes them 40-foot poles. So I'm concerned about all this light pollution. The American Medical Association passed a resolution in 2012 that recognizes a host of problems with light pollution, including health issues, such as breast cancer, and we have a breast cancer survivor here on the west side of the property. Could I finish my quote, please?
I would ask that you be allowed to quickly complete your...
Yes. Including health issues such as breast cancer that are associated with human eye exposure to light at night. The AMA resolution in 2012 explains that the increasing amount of light in the world, including streetlight glare and intrusive light that trespasses into bedroom windows and homes, is linked to the higher rates of cancer and other human health problems. It reduces the production of melatonin, a hormone that helps regulate sleep cycles and hampers the immune system. Any question?
Seeing no questions in the queue. Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate you coming. Thanks for coming down tonight. Anyone else care to testify? Yes, sir. Come on.
Yeah, I'm Rod Perry, Karen's husband. And first of all, I want to really commend you, probably beyond anyone that's ever testified before you before. I appreciate your giving. I recruited and ran the largest volunteer force in the state of Alaska for years, and volunteerism is a truly powerful societal force able to change a city, state, and nation. So keep up the good work. Everybody else has really covered most of the material that I had intended to better than I could have. I was glad to see that Debbie was so intimate with the land. I'm a biologist by training, but a long-time interest in geology. I've been a sheep guide, a sheep hunter. I've frequented high places, been around recently glaciated areas. It's very easy for me to interpret the glacial history of this dome that we live on. If you wander it, you can see the living rock popping out in places. On our property, there are 3 different glacial moraines that pop up, a large glacial erratic. If you've been around recently glaciated areas, stripped of, with no vegetation having grown there yet, you can see, these kinds of forms. There'll always be little pockets where maybe little lakelets form. And such is the character of this area here on McKinley View. McKinley View is a couple miles long. If you were to walk it, it would be very well drained until you come to this one area right here. There's about a 200 to 300 foot stretch where obviously anyone that can interpret it can see it was a little gouged out kettle over the centuries. It's filled with detritus. It's soupy. You can't get a four-wheeler through there in the worst times without getting stuck. We've seen numerous people stuck and trying to be pulled out. Here's even a couple of logs that MEA fell. There are logs. I've tried to figure out how to get to them with a truck. I can't get to them. I'm scratching my head without a four-wheeler to see how I can get them into my wood pile. This area here comes down and goes onto the McNamara's property and the west side of the MEA property. Conveniently, they did their test work over on this side, and in fact, they said in one report that the expansion was supposed to be to the south and east, when actually it was supposed to be to the west and north of that. But in order to get this home on there, the man who owned the property originally was an excavator, a professional excavator with all the equipment. He went in and removed all of that soup and filled it with gravel and rock to be able to even build a house there. It's the same over here. The property changes abruptly about right there. It's night and day. So 2 miles this way, virtually, another half mile that way. It's pretty well drained, but that area right there
So
will always be a problem area. Their drainage plan is bogus, and it's faulted. I think that's what I can add to it.
Have any questions? I don't see any questions in queue. Thanks very much for coming down tonight, sir. Anyone else care to testify? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. My name is Marilyn McNamara, and I live at the house behind this this property. There's a couple of things that I wanted to say. My husband did mention to you that I am a cancer survivor, and the high-tension wires that are coming towards the back of our house, 100 feet, scare me half to death. Any person who's been through cancer always has the fear of cancer returning, and knowing that there might be a possibility of something that could cause that is even more terrifying. We have been in this community for over 24 years. We've been in that house 24 years. We bought it as foreclosed property. Had planned to retire there. We did a lot of upgrades to the house to prevent us from having to do a whole lot of stuff once we do retire. We are approaching those years. And it breaks my heart to think of us having to have to move, and that's what will happen. We invested 16 years with the Chugach Volunteer Fire Department. We have invested in that community, and I'd hate to see that end, but it will end if this does go in. Thank you for your time.
We have a question, ma'am? Ma'am? Commissioner Ferguson has a question?
Yeah, you're going to help me out here. Would you explain the significance of the yellow arrow in the photograph on the right? Your husband pointed that out to me during the break, and I wanted to let the other members know what our discussion was about. And that was taken from your property. The picture was taken from your...
Yeah, ma'am, can you step back? Take the picture back to the microphone. Thanks, great. You're saying some great stuff. I want to hear it.
We see on the bottom of the picture the top rail of your deck, and that yellow arrow is where the existing substation is now.
Correct. Actually, the substation itself is right here, and this is the building that houses
switchgear.
The switchgear.
All right. I just had a conversation with your husband off the record, and I wanted to disclose it to the rest of the commission up here is what I'm doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more
Thank you, Ms. McNamara. No more questions. Thank you very much. Anyone else care to testify? Anybody else? Any more testimony? If not, then Mr. Adams, you have a minute of rebuttal.
Thank you, Chair McKay. I think as Commissioner Robinson succinctly asked, is there a way of satisfying this? And the problem is that's very difficult, and I would suggest not possible. The reality is that infrastructure is not pretty. Infrastructure is tough to fit into neighborhoods. This has been there a long time. There's been suggestion that there's other sites. Certainly there are other sites. Certainly it would be expensive, and certainly MEA doesn't want to spend the money to do that. But there's a public side to that, too. That site also will have to go through the same process. Now, how easy is it going to be to find that site? Not only is it going to be hard to find that site, but how difficult is it going to be able to find the easements, procure those easements, and get approval of the transmission lines that have to serve that substation as well. So it's not just a financial issue, it's still a public issue as well. I'm happy to...
We have a few in the queue there. Commissioner Dean?
Through the chair, I was hoping you could answer some questions for me out of the packet that we have, not the one that you guys provided, but the one that's numbered 1 through pages 208. If you could turn to page 187, 188, 189, and 190. You guys have to have a SWEPS plan, and I'm sure you guys are supposed to have a Cecil card holder that walks through regularly. I see a plan not being followed through on. When I look at the dates, it bothers me that it's not something that is going away. If you look at the dates, are in September and in October, over a month's time, that we have water issues. They look like they're probably on the west end of the lot. Can you tell me what your Cecil and SWEPS plan is? And why this
I was
exists?
prepared to certainly deal with land use issues I can tell you that's still on the property. I can tell you that. That's on this side of the fence, and there's still another 25 feet.
There is
of
water
force.
on the other side of the fence, too. Yeah.
Yes, and that's my point, is that's still on ML&P property. With respect to the compliance with the plans, I can't address that. I just didn't come prepared to address that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Is there anybody here that came from MEA that could address that issue?
And well, I guess the question is, what is your question, really?
Well, we are dealing with landscaping, and I'd like to know how the landscaping and the drainage issues are going to be addressed in this plan so these types of problems don't continue. If they're already existing, I'm just looking at, what's it going to be like next fall when it rains again?
Yes, through the chair, Ms. Dean. My question, I'm just trying to get to the root of your question. For example, if we go to 190, that may be one of the best ones, that there's a silt fence, right?
Yes.
And then there's a core log,
Yes.
right? And there's water impounded on both sides. There's water impounded on one side, and then there's standing water on the other.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily indicate a violation
I'm not
of any
suggesting
SWIP.
it's a violation at all. I'm just
So, and I'm just trying to clarify my understanding of what your question is. That's my only question.
My issue is that you have some drainage issues, and those wattles and silt fences can't stay on that property forever as a method of drainage. At some point, you're going to have to do something else other than silt fences and wattles in order to contain that drainage.
Yeah.
So what's the long-term plan?
Okay, thank you. That helps. Let me just address this, and then you can, simply put, the project is only 10% done. So there's a long ways to go, I think, is the easy answer to that. And there's a grading and drainage plan that's been approved by the municipality within the last month. And so that will guide future construction. So this is Mr. Norm Gucher, and he may be able to answer more specifics.
Where's your plan, the overall site plan you're doing? The south side down here, Mount McKinley View is high. You've got a slope coming down here. This is the McNamara's property here. We have put in a detention basin here to pick up drainage that's coming from the higher ground to the south, preventing it from getting actually onto the substation pad. So that will collect in here, go into the underlying gravel layers, and continue on underground. The drainage over the substation pad itself is constructed of imported pit run gravel, capped with 6 inches of clean 3/4 inch gravel. That 6-inch cap is an electrical code requirement for the surface inside a substation, safety issue. Water that falls on that, for the most part, will drop into that, will go into that gravel, probably better than it has in the previous ground cover. Flow over the surface or through the gravels, retaining wall that has been discussed, actually the concrete retaining wall has been discussed starts here. The ground's high and sloping this way. That concrete wall starts here, comes to this corner, and comes across to about here. Inside, behind that wall, is a pocket of coarse gravel to help keep water from accumulating behind. There's a perforated pipe that runs this way to pick up water from inside the fill and lets it go through weep holes in the wall into this detention basin. This detention basin again goes, the water, it's actually from the ground surface about 7 feet deep. We've got a 2-foot detention on the surface, and then a trench that's 3 feet wide and 5 feet deep that's filled with just large, clean rock. So we don't create an attractive nuisance, something that a kid might would be attracted to, which is outside the fence, so they could get to it. So we don't expect, even with a 100-year storm, we don't expect water to be accumulating in there, even during a heavy storm that would actually approach freestanding water on the surface. But the water will drain into here and then into the gravels and go on away in the subterranean gravels to the north. On the McNamara side, they've mentioned the Gabion walls. They're outside here to support fill that will support these plantings. So you've got the area between this concrete retaining wall, which doesn't have the weep holes in it. That water, any water that comes against that goes all the way north and comes out in the drainage basin. The area between the Gabion walls and that concrete wall is gently sloped and backfilled so that they'll have material in there, soil in there to support those new plantings. Outside, in the 7 feet or so outside that Gabion wall, is essentially just the native vegetation that's there. Is not being filled, not being cut, left in as close as possible to existing condition, with what this landscape drawing shows, some additional shrub plantings in that area. So we've reduced greatly, redirected. We've collected the water, we've redirected it so it's not flowing towards McNamara's. It's flowing north towards undeveloped property to the north. It's being picked up per the municipal code and put into infiltration basins. And I might say that what we're designing for here is to deal with a 100-year storm event. The more normal year-to-year storms won't be producing enough water that we should see a great deal of water flowing on this site. The total property is 2.06 acres. About the south quarter is pretty steep ground, existing vegetation that will not be disturbed. Where the existing substation sits in this area, that's going to be pretty well clear now. That will ultimately, outside what's south and outside the fence, will either be revegetated or be part of this detention basin. We have about 1.2 acres inside the fence that will be the new substation pad. And then we've got 25-foot strips, setbacks, north and west, that we're basically landscaping. We're using this one for detention basin. The east side over by Steffes, between the Steffes right-of-way and the fence is landscaped except for the driveways. Does that help your understanding?
I have two more questions related to that, though. One is, why are you building up this lot so high? And the next one is there a page on here that shows us exactly a map of where those concrete retaining walls will be? They look like they're fairly tall.
There are plans copies of the plan sheets that show those in the packet. Dwayne, can you find those sheets? The height of that concrete wall varies because the slope of the ground varies.
Yes,
the ground varies.
I'm sure it's a
step. What the retaining wall does is take that sloping ground and make a level place where we can have a substation.
He just wants you.
Yeah. I can say that the ground slopes, the low part of the lot is that northwest corner. So the west wall, as I said earlier, starts essentially at ground level and works to the corner and then turns east. And again, basically, before we hit to the far east end of the substation, we run out of elevation, so the retaining wall dies. If you look at page 149 in the packet, there are some profiles of the retaining wall, and there should be another sheet in here somewhere that shows more information on the retaining wall. Back further, I think it's back further.
There it is.
157 shows a cross-section on the west side from the retaining wall through the planting and the gabion baskets to the property line. So the sheet I was looking for, I'm not seeing right quickly. It basically is a structural drawing of the retaining wall. I'm not seeing it.
And this is the wall that you were given a permit for footing and foundation, correct? Or not?
I don't know if they've started on that foundation wall or that retaining wall. They have not started on the retaining wall yet. It's my understanding what they were doing under the foundation and putting a foundation permit was getting the bulk of the fill in the interior and actually getting the subsurface structure to support the steel structures, the ground plane, and those things.
Do you remember the date that you were given that footing and foundation permit by Sharon Walsh?
Pardon?
Do you remember the date that you were given that footing
I
and
don't.
foundation permit from Sharon Walsh?
There's, if you go to page 23, there's a timeline there, and go towards the bottom. There's 8/6/13, 2 p.m. meeting with Sharon Walsh, 8/15, authorization for fill and grade. This is it. It's dated 8/10/20. Oh, that's expiration date. 8/27/2013 is the date on this.
Thank you.
Is that Ms. Dean?
Yes, thank you. That helps me understand your drainage plan.
All right, Mr. Ferguson.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Before you got sidetracked, you were summarizing. We've let the other side run a little long with their summaries. I think it'd be fair to let you go, as long as it's brief. Continue your summary there.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Ferguson. I think, these are very difficult cases, and the hope is that we do least harm when we do infrastructure projects, and whether it's a street or whether it's a major highway. These same people were affected greatly by the Eklutna water line. Not a one of them benefits with the Eklutna water line. But fundamentally, it is a tremendous important asset to this community, and it allows us to live here. The incremental expansion of utilities is unfortunately the cost of an expanding population, and that population is what it is that brings a lot of us here. If it doesn't expand, we stagnate. So can we build infrastructure that does the least damage possible? In this case, we're relatively fortunate that the impact to the neighborhood is relatively minor, actually. Is that good? No, that's not good, but it is what it is, and it's unfortunate. There's a lot of other things that were discussed I'd be happy to ask as far as conditions approval or other things, but the fundamental test of the approval of anything gets back to the comprehensive plan. In Chugach Eagle River, it gets back to that fundamental statement. Facilities and services are located, designed, and maintained to accommodate current and future needs in the area in an effective, cost-efficient, and timely manner. Does this do that? Yes, it does that. Are there other sites that would do that as well? Very, very doubtful. I would say no.
Commissioner Yoshimura?
Yes, thank you. As you know, the Commission has a variety of choices. One is to approve it, one is to disapprove it, one is to approve it with conditions, and the other fourth alternative is to postpone this and send you back to work with the community. But if I understood you correctly previously, you said that, or you indicated that going back and working with the community is not an option. Did I, because you felt that they could never be satisfied?
Through the chair, Commissioner Yoshimura, I think that those were Mr. McNamara's very words as well. He doesn't think that there's anything that can be done to satisfy his needs. And I think that that's accurate. I've met with Mr. McNamara myself. Matanuska Electric Association met with him 5 times. I wanted to get a sense, is there, I mean, I like to seek compromise. That's what I do. And I was hoping to find something, and we explored different ideas. We explored even using his property and planting a forest on his property, but that was not satisfactory either. I think he summarized it very well. It's not in the cards in this case.
Well, from the testimony that we've heard tonight, there's more than Mr. McNamara. There is a whole community that has given, and community representatives that have given testimony tonight. So, and several of them have indicated, or 1 or 2 of them have indicated, that to return it to the community, that perhaps there is some sort of compromise. But as a representative of MEA, are you telling me you want us to vote up or down? Is that what you're telling us? Because we can do that, vote up or down, if there is no, if you are unwilling to go back to the community. I mean, I can think of several solutions, potentially. One, a fund for potential mitigation for drainage in that particular corner that is wet and will probably remain wet. I can think of a 50-foot buffer on the west side. I can think of a $1,000 a day fine for noise limitation above 50 decibels. I mean, I can, you know, there's probably many other things that could help mitigate this situation. But as the representative of MEA, are you saying you're not willing to go back to the community? Because it's not just Mr. McNamara. It's a community issue as it relates to the comprehensive plan, for one thing.
Through the chair, Commissioner Yoshimura, I think, though, you know, we've had representatives of the broad community here. Private citizens have been quite limited relative to what this commission usually sees in instances like this. Now, the direct impacts, I'm not to suggest anyone driving by adjacent streets won't see this, but the direct impacts are very limited in this case, and that very person said that he sees nothing that is going to satisfy his needs. So let's start with this. Now, with respect to those conditions, first of all, the noise, 50 decibels, that's not an issue. You could put light limitations, nothing exceeding 0.1 foot candles outside of the fence on normal operating. That would be very fine as well. The 50-foot buffer is tremendously problematic, and it's problematic from this direction, and that is how the lines, the distribution lines that feed this, and how the whole substation design relates to that is related to how it enters. And in this case, we could do that. We could flip this, but what happens then is that a line that serves this substation then has to cross that yard. And in order to do that, there are certain requirements with respect to separation distances. That separation distance in this case means not a 42-foot tower, but a 70 to 80-foot tower to achieve that crossover satisfactory to meet the electrical code requirements. So these are the things I know that we like to think in broad terms of providing conditions. I sat here for 6 years and did the same thing, but the reality is that this is a problematic situation. It's very difficult.
Well, how much construction? I just want to understand how much construction has occurred within that 50-foot west side area.
A good number of the footings and foundations are in, but not complete. So there is still a lot of footing and foundations to be put in. They were trying to get it in before the frost, obviously, and so they delayed that.
So
there's still a lot of work to go on.
So theoretically, if there had been proper community input prior to and during the design stage, it could have been redesigned so that there would not have been the need for only a 25-foot buffer?
Through the chair, no is the answer to that, and that's fundamentally related to this very issue, that it comes in one direction and everything has to work sequentially from that one direction. And so flipping this, or that things have to happen in a certain order. And so for that order to be turned 90 degrees, then that whole routing in has to go through this sequential operation to arrive at that. And so with respect to the layout, it's very prescribed. There's not a lot of flexibility in the layout inside that fence. We could turn that, we can do lots of things with that, but the reality is it's a relationship to where it's coming from, that distribution coming in. And as soon as we start crossing that, then we're into this high tower. I mean, we aren't into a high tower. And with respect to, for example, the discussion about the height limitations, yes, the height limitation is 35 feet, but understand, in R6, but understand, the definition is the midpoint of that, the highest roof. It's not the high point. So 42 feet relative to this zoning district is under a lot of structures that are possible in this. So those are the nuances that affect this, but no, inside that doesn't change. Going back to the community, there's not a lot of flexibility there with respect to what to do, and the reason is it's a very small site. That's the problem. This is one of the smallest sites they have for a substation like this.
Well, I guess I have two comments, and there are other people that may have comments. You know, first of all, when I'm considering a development on a much smaller scale than this, the first thing, before I hire the civil engineer to design the plans for the roads, water, and sewer, is you look at the surrounding area, you look at what the requirements are, you look at what the entitlements are, or you look at what the variances are that you're going to need. And you do. I mean, in our rewrite of Title 21, we said very emphatically that there has to be a public meeting for projects. Not after you get a footing and foundation, but you have to have a public process. And I really do feel that didn't really occur at a time when it should have occurred. So it is disappointing to know that you're under construction, and basically what you're saying is there's no compromise here. You either want it the way you've got it, or you don't want it. I don't know how many millions of dollars that you already have invested, but, you know, you've been turned down once already, and I can't speak for any other commissioners, but this is a very difficult situation.
Through the chair, Commissioner Yoshimura, I don't think it's that straightforward. This is not a house that you're trying to fit on a site, because there's a lot of flexibility in a house. You can move the living room, you can move the dining room. This doesn't work that way. There's certain things about an electrical substation that through many, many accidents, many, many problems, we've come to a realization that this is the way we designed them. We don't have the flexibility with this structure that we do with many other things that we build on the hillside or we build other ways. This is an electrical utility that has certain prescriptions. Now, with respect to, there's been no compromise. The MEA has tried to work very carefully with the one homeowner who's affected here. And They have provided the Gabion retaining walls, they've raised the landscape, they've met the requirements of this commission in their last findings for an adequate drainage plan and an adequate landscape plan. They've done that. They've gone back to the community. They've been to the Birchwood Community Council twice, and they've been also to the Chugiak Community Council. So relative to most public processes, this actually goes beyond what many public processes go through before this commission.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions in queue, but I'm not sure I heard the answer to one of Ms. Dean's question. I think she had a question. I think I heard the walls and the drainage, but I didn't hear why the whole pad was raised. Did you hear that? I didn't hear that one.
No, you're right.
And the whole pad was raised, so the impact on the west side is 10 feet, and I didn't hear the explanation on that. Chair Mulcahy, it meets grade at Steffes Street. And so from Steffes Street, we don't want to grade onto the property to the west, to Mr. McNamara's property, right? So basically, that whole thing basically lays flat straight across there so that it can drain to the north and drain to the south. So, yes, the whole site drops 8 feet. That 8 feet that we talked about, that drops 8 feet. So to bring that up so that that water doesn't drain onto Mr. McNamara, then that side has to come up. So did you look at lowering the side on, and I apologize, I don't know the correct way to pronounce it, Steffes?
Steffes?
Lee Jordan would chew me out. He probably would give me a history on the Steffes family. Why do we not lower that side?
The question is, was that considered to drop that?
Why do we raise the west and not try to lower the east or mitigate somewhere in the middle?
I assume access is one issue. I might turn to it's an access issue to get down and service the facility.
I'm not satisfied with that answer, but I'll accept it. Okay, I see no more questions in the queue, so that concludes the public testimony. So the issue now rests with the body. What are we going to do? I have a motion. Commissioner Yoshimura.
In the case of 2013-159, the petitioner being the Matanuska Electric Association, a zoning for a conditional use for a utility substation, I move for approval.
Second by Ms. Dean. A motion to approve has been laid on the table with a second by Ms. Dean. Ms. Yoshimura, care to discuss your motion?
I'm very disappointed to say that I am not going to support my motion. I would like to have a postponement so that this petitioner could go back and continue to work with the community, but they have said quite plainly that that's not their desire or intent. And so without some further compromise by MEA regarding the drainage, a 50-foot west side setback, limitations for lighting and sound, and a fund for replacement of potential drainage and septic issues in the northwest corner, I'm not prepared to vote for the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Did you want to comment on your second?
Thank you, through the chair. I have one additional comment. I am very disappointed in Sharon Walsh down at Building Safety giving a permit for footing and foundation before a conditional use permit was issued. It's put the petitioner in a bad situation. They've spent quite a bit of money putting all this together. And Sharon, I believe, incorrectly issued a footing and foundation permit without a conditional use permit. And I think it's put us all in a bad situation. And I hate to also not support this motion. It's a terrible situation. We all need power, and nobody wants to be without enough power, and we like to see infrastructure happen. And I don't want to be a NIMBY, but I do feel that a lot more thought needs to be put into this project.
Commissioner Ferguson.
You know, anytime something comes back twice, it's difficult. The first time I had no trouble voting it down because it was not a considered plan. We didn't have enough information. Landscaping was not included. Drainage was not included. So I had no trouble voting it down the first time. But we don't shoot applicants, and they made a mistake. They corrected their mistake. The community has a bad taste because of the prior error. I mean, most of the testimony we've heard has to do with the prior submittal, not the current submittal. The community also has decided that we don't like whale oil lamps, and we don't like kerosene lamps, and we need power. So how do we weigh that issue between needing the power and the community? I believe that noise limitations, though I would need some discussion on exactly what do we mean by 50 dB, having studied that for quite a while under Title 21. Do we mean peaking? Do we mean average? Do we mean nominal? Do we mean over 1 minute, over 5 minutes? I mean, we could have a doctoral dissertation over noise limits. So I believe we can handle that issue. I agree that the drainage issue has enough concern that I would back a insurance policy or some mechanism to protect the adjacent landowners if the drainage plan doesn't work. I can handle that. I can handle the 0.1 foot candles. I listened very hard to the lady's comment about the one light. I agree with that. I have a DOT street light outside my house that, occasionally it goes out. And so I understand those concerns. But we come back to it. We need power. MEA wants to sell us power. Sending it back to the community doesn't do what the community needs unless we can give some guidance to the community and the MEA on how to solve this thing. Because this is the second time it's been here. And occasionally around here, we end up not making a decision, and we haven't helped anybody. We help people by making a decision that's thoughtful. And so I would be willing to support a affirmative decision with limitations that would give them direction. Because I think they have made progress in, people and organizations at times make mistakes. And I think they made a mistake before, but I think they have come back and tried to solve that mistake now.
Commissioner Spring.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I won't be supporting the motion either. The way I base my decision, I think, is primarily on, which I think is the correct way of doing it, on whether or not it meets the conditional use standards. And they meet most of the standards, I think. They've done a pretty good job of trying to mitigate the impacts on noise and the drainage. I have to admit, might be a little bit above my head, but it looks like they have a professional engineer that did a drainage study, and he puts his stamp on it. So, and he assures us that it will solve the problem. So I believe that's true, and so I don't think there's the environmental impacts under conditional use. But where I have a problem is whether or not the project is compatible with the existing and planned land uses in the surrounding neighborhood, and I've been involved in utility substation conditional uses before, and I've never seen one this big this large, this scale of a substation anywhere, in my experience. And there might be one around that I'm not aware of, but most of them are much smaller than this. I don't think there's any way, as the petitioner said, to come up with some type of resolution, a way to mitigate the impact on the next door neighbor in particular. It is clearly incompatible with that existing use. And it doesn't say it has to be incompatible with, 10 uses or 5 uses. It just has to be incompatible with one use as far as I'm concerned, unless somebody wants to interpret this differently. What I think should have happened, and like Commissioner Yoshimura said, due diligence is required whenever you purchase property. What should have happened is, prior to purchasing the property, they should have probably gone through with a conditional use review prior, so that they know whether or not this is compatible and whether or not this is a project that's doable. Well, now it's a little bit too far down the road for them to go back and do that before they buy it. They already bought it. They cleared the land. But that's the problem with not doing your due diligence. And I don't think it's our responsibility to correct that mistake. I guess you learn by your mistakes. And God knows I made lots of them, so I've learned I'm pretty smart as a result, probably. One other question I have regarding conditional use standards is the standard regarding the comprehensive plan. The Chugach River Comprehensive Plan, and one of the goals, as the petitioner's representative stated, is that facilities are needed, or should be permitted, that accommodate growth and development in Chugach River. Now, I don't have the information to determine whether or not this particular facility meets that goal. What I heard was that there's a half and half. There's part safety issues involving they need to upgrade this utility substation, and there's a partial growth requirement to accommodate future growth. But I see no information regarding how this is going to meet future growth. What area does this serve? How many houses are going to be required, are anticipated to be built in that service area? What percentage of this project is needed to accommodate growth? I have no idea. Maybe it could be much smaller. If your estimate is too high, you say 3,000 from 2,000, then maybe this part of this project isn't needed. But I have no basis of determining whether that's true or not. So as a result, I believe it probably fails to meet that other standard for conditional use.
Thank you. Commissioner Robinson?
I agree with much of what has been said. I simply would like to add that I won't be supporting the conditional use application, and it's a difficult decision to make. I think a lot of our discussions that we have at this commission lately in terms of budgeting, frankly in this community, have to do with the cost effectiveness, learning how to better develop our infrastructure in ways that allow us to grow, but also allow us to grow in a smart fashion. And I truly believe that's what MEA was trying to do here. That said, when I look at the standards for the conditional use and I hear the testimony and I hear the talk about this being a large facility on a small site, that pretty much sums it up for me. I look at the lot coverage requirements in the R6 zoning district and it says 30%, and while someone can put a house and fill the rest of their yard up with a driveway and still meet the lot coverage, I don't think the same should hold true for a utility substation that builds out basically to the edges of the setback on 3 of the 4 sides. I think it's a misinterpretation that the side setback of 25 feet is on the western side. I think it should be the rear setback of 50 feet. I think further, while the idea of a retaining wall is to help raise the elevation, I think the fact that the retaining wall ends up being 8 feet from the property line, I think further sort of violates the idea of setbacks in the R6 neighborhoods. Now that said, I do not believe that we just simply shouldn't have substations in our 6 neighborhoods, just like I don't believe we need substations and we need utilities in all neighborhoods, in all parts of the community, but they do have to consider their surroundings. So I think, like Mr. Ferguson, I think there would be conditions under which I would accept this conditional use permit, perhaps a smaller substation, perhaps a larger lot with the same size substation, but as it's currently presented, I'm not going to be supporting it.
Commissioner Schmier, you're still in the queue. Okay, then Commissioner Ferguson, you're back up.
Through the chair, Mr. Ferguson, there is an appeal process that the applicant can follow by going to the Board of Adjustment. Depending on the outcome of the Board of Adjustment, if necessary, this can proceed to court, can proceed to Superior Court, and some cases have gone all the way to the Alaska Supreme Court.
Commissioner Barker.
I have a question for staff. Through the chair, what is the expectation of the public process on the part of the petitioner?
Through the chair, Ms. Barker, under the current code that exists, the current code, we've heard talk about a public meeting being required. This was submitted in 2013. The 2014 code, let's call it, the one that became effective in January 1, 2014, is the one that requires a public meeting. That is not required under the code that was in effect last year. So a public meeting was not required, but appearances before community councils have always been encouraged, and generally on what has turned out to be a very important case for the community, it is very important to attend a community council meeting prior to appearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission. But under the code that this was reviewed, a public meeting was not a requirement in code as it is with the Title 21 that became effective January 1. This was accepted and reviewed under the old code.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm asking it because I think at the heart of this has been a whole failure of the public process. But I'm not sure how we address that with any other kind of remedy except to deny the petition.
Commissioner Strike. I'm sorry.
I didn't know if Commissioner Barker wanted a response to that, but subsequent, the applicant did attend community council meetings and attempted to explain the procedure. They did visit folks within 500 feet, and there was misunderstanding of the size on the part of the neighbors of how it was explained to them, the size of the new or the upgraded or the new substation. Most people did not, that have testified, said they had no idea how big it was going to be, and that wasn't answered with the community, through the community outreach that MEA attempted back in August, September of prior to submitting the application for the very first case, 2013-123, that was heard in September. So there was some miscommunication or something that was not communicated well to the neighbors.
Thank you. And Commissioner Strike.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm having difficulty getting behind this motion, and I have to remind myself this is a new application. The inconsistencies that I'm seeing inconsistencies with the drainage report. Even your own folks can't decide how old the structure is. We heard in 30 years, 40 years, up to 60 years. Inconsistencies. The property itself isn't conducive, I believe, to this size of structure, which is one of the biggest reasons I can't support this. But I would remind the MEA, you're part of this community too. You've got property there. You've got a investment there. And so embracing the community and involving the community up front, because we heard a number of testimony that you did not rebut. We heard from Mr. Starr, Ms. Dubansky. We heard from the Community Council. Not one rebuttal to what they stated, what they said. And I just remind you, you're part of this community as well. Please act like it.
Well, I'll make just a couple quick comments here. I'm also not going to be able to support the motion. This is tough for me. I'm a huge fan of the new power station. I understand. I am not, maybe not in the total majority on this, but I am convinced that we need this upgrade, an upgraded substation to be able to support the neighborhood. It's essential that we do that, but it needs to be done right. And really frustrated. I really wish the petitioner had asked for a postponement rather than us having to vote this up and down. Because if we sit here and try to come up with all the conditions to make it right, we're not electrical experts. We're going to end up messing this up and possibly making matters worse. And, you know, I heard you, Mr. Adams, but, you know, I spent my years in the military as a signal officer. I understand electronics a little bit, electricity a little bit. I'm not an engineer. Same thing. When I was commanding Fort Richardson, major utility project, they told me the same thing. It cannot be done the way you want it. I said, fine, then it won't be done. 2 weeks later, they were in my office, totally redesigned. It was done correctly to the way it minimized the impact. Same issue. They were just going to mess with my soldiers and with the families living on the base, and I wouldn't let that happen. They fixed it in 2 weeks, and we're back to me. 50-foot setback. That needs to be entertained. The fact that the wall is within the setback is a good question. Noise limitation, drainage plan, looking at the northwest, addressing the springs that Ms. Osiander discussed. Well known in that neighborhood. That should have been in the drainage plan. We all know about it. I really like Commissioner Yosh's Muir's suggestion about some kind of escrow or some kind of fund to be able to address unforeseen impacts. Working in this neighborhood, I can tell you that's going to happen. The answer on the pad. Why are we raising the whole thing? Why can't we look at lowering it? Lowering it down possibly at the western grade level and putting the drainage in there would have mitigated. I think there's several things that could be done to try to mitigate this to make it work. And if it can't, you had the assembly here, 2 members of the assembly. No, it's not a majority, although sometimes Bill thinks he is, right, Bill? They are willing to work hard to try to figure this out. We have a Klutna here. They are willing to work hard to try to figure this out if there's another alternative, okay? I am not convinced. We've done our homework on this one, and I don't want to be up here trying to come up with all the conditions and possibly end up making more damage than good. Greg, I'm supposed to be the final word before we vote. Go ahead, Greg.
I have a question. Perhaps this is for staff, because as we can see how this is moving forward, or not moving forward, the process, I believe you explained, is an appeal process that takes place after this commission. And my concern is that it could get into an appeal review that would be a thumbs up, thumbs down without any conditions whatsoever. So the concern I would have is that if this were to move forward in any way, shape, or form, are any conditions that have been identified by the commission incorporated, or are they all for naught, which is, therefore, we're looking at a tactical play here?
That's why I just went through and listed all these down, because this minutes is what goes forward on the appeal. So I want to make sure that we have captured all of our objections. They're articulated, and they will be in the resolution So if there's any other, we need to make sure that they are in there, because it's our resolution that goes forward in the event of appeal either way. Does that answer your question? We're fine. All right, so I guess we need to use the machine, so
Mr. Chair? Actually, it is a verbatim transcript that if there is an appeal, it's a verbatim transcript. The appeal is based solely on the record. The conditions are not placed on this case because the vote appears to be one that is going to fail. So it's going to go forward without any conditions. So the Board of Adjustment has three options. They can grant the appeal, they can support the commission in its findings. In that event, it will go to, if it is pursued further, it's pursued to Superior Court, or it can be remanded back to the commission. The commission will have the same record if it's remanded back as you're seeing tonight. So you have made suggestions, but there isn't any approved case or any approved conditions that will go forward with any.
But they are now in the verbatim transcripts, so they are on record and they are captured. That those are our concerns.
They're on the record, but they're, I don't know,
Mr. Chairman, the Board of Adjustment, when they look at the appeal, they'll take those into consideration in making their decision.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Please vote. Looks like that goes down 7-1, so the conditional use is denied. And again, let me remind you that you have any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. That is not applicable in this case. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is in the Commission's final decision. A fee for appeal is required, and I believe, Mr. Weaver, this goes to the Board of Adjustments first? Board of Adjustments is the first appeal? Correct. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to case 2014-008, Municipality of Anchorage, review and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Assembly on Ordinance 2013-139. Staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a very apropos ordinance to come before you at this meeting.
Timing is everything, ma'am.
Timing is everything, and I don't know if Mr. Starr plans to stick around, but this is an ordinance that Assemblymember Starr did introduce. And it does make two changes to the new code. One is that it changes all utility substations in residential districts from an administrative site plan review process to a conditional use process. And the second change is that just in the Chugach-Eagle River area, so this is a change in Chapter 10, it changes all high-voltage transmission towers in residential districts to the conditional use process. As currently adopted both in the current code and the new code, high-voltage transmission towers up to 70 feet in height are allowed as permitted uses. The change from, or as I stated in the staff report, in the current/old code, utility substations are a conditional use in all residential districts, in commercial districts except for the B4, and they're permitted use in the other districts. Through the rewrite process, we did have a conscious effort to reduce the number of conditional uses in an attempt to streamline development processes. And in the utility substation cases that we've processed in the past, there, to my knowledge, has not been one as contentious as this particular one. So this was one of the uses that had been adopted as moving from a conditional use to an administrative site plan review. And we didn't hear any issues with that during the Title 21 rewrite process. So the staff's recommendation is that the changes to the code remain as adopted in the new code. Thank you.
Thanks for the staff report. Assemblyman Starr, I guess you're technically not the petitioner, but you want to talk about your proposed ordinance, sir?
And I'll try not to be wordy. You guys have had a fair night. But what you're also seeing now is it's sort of a new requirement that and I think it's a good one, which is if we're going to tweak and change and make modifications to the new rewrite, which we all spend a lot of time on, thank you for that, that you have a requirement to weigh in. And so that's what you're seeing here as well. And so it started for me with the obviously approval of Chapter 10, which is land use code specific to Chugiak Eagle River. I felt comfortable sort of with the attitude of getting proactive. And it's a weird spin on my political take because I don't usually do this in public, but I'm going to run again. And the reason for running again is to be sure that we can implement some of the things that are now on paper. I'm startled it took so long. Title 21 rewrite in Chapter 10 was sort of my big focus there. But now I see what's happening next, and you saw a little bit of it tonight, is the development phases are starting to kick in. And we've missed a few things. We've missed the high tower lines that are going to go through residentials. We've missed road designs. We've missed streetlight designs. Some of it we consciously put off, and some of it we just didn't do exactly right. And now I have a mechanism, quite frankly, or we, with Ms. Dembowski and myself and planning staff, we have a mechanism now to modify Chapter 10 specifically and not mess up the rest of Anchorage Code. Or in this case, I think it's still prudent to have the high tower utility poles come to this body and have a conditional use. So the nuance, if you'll turn to the page 3 of that, changes 2 of the tables inside the new rewrite, which is now effective as by choice. So residential 1 through 10, R10 in the Anchorage areas requires a conditional use as opposed to administrative site plan review. That's one change. And then it also changes Table 10 and the requirements that would have taken just basically a permitted use. Essentially, a resident could wake up with a power pole in his backyard and have no input, being a permitted use in the new code. Residential is now district, as you know, Chugiak Eagle River residential 1 through 10. So it's not an attempt, I don't think, to add more regulation to the development process, but my overall attempt to get proactive and sort of control the development, the design, talk about undergrounding. And I'll end with this, is that Erica did a good job of referencing inside this supplement that the definition of sort of a substation has now changed into things that we didn't. I'd almost like the equipment associated with cell towers and all the drama that's going on with cell tower development to have been included in the definition of that. But if I can just step back just for a second and see where the definition of substations, but it's changed now. Electric transformer stations, gas regulator stations, water reservoirs, telephone exchange facilities, water and sewage collection and pumping stations, all the things that go in. That's on page 1. That's the new definition of an utility substation. So I think rather than just sort of let it happen or let staff determine that it's good development, let's let the process work. And Ms. Barker, this is the process, and I think it does work. So to answer that question, I'm glad you're here too for the resident basis of Chugiak Eagle River. This is coming our way.
We have some questions in the queue, Commissioner.
Yeah, I guess just end with my expectations isn't, I don't necessarily need you to take a yes or a no. Sometimes you write letters that are very helpful to us when we sit up there on Tuesday nights and refer, but this will come back to us after the formality of coming here, and I intended to. That's why I didn't write a verbose thing. I'm wordy enough, so. But the idea that you weigh in on it would be helpful, absolutely, the inclusive to the process. And then I would prefer to have packaged a few changes together, so I'm hoping that you're not going to just see them one at a time, but yet we do a little larger book, maybe not as big as the last 4 inches that you got to deal with, but a couple at a time would be more appropriate, I think. But this one, I think, is timely. I want to get ahead of it. Questions?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Robinson, you're up.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, as someone that commutes home and lives just off of East Northern Lights every day, I can understand where you're coming from,
Right.
having moved here shortly before those things came up, and then the aftermath. It was quite an impression on the community.
Sure.
As a developer of multifamily housing, oftentimes affordable housing, we sometimes get pushback on our projects. We try to do our best to meet all the standards and think we do good work. I think one of the things that is always difficult is when we have things like a conditional use that don't really specify the standards. And so one of the problems I think we had on the previous case is that we have to evaluate a substation on general conditional use standards that can be used for everything from a parking lot to, whatever else that's not specifically mentioned with standards. No matter what you do, a tower is going to be controversial, and you're going to get people that don't want it. And unless there are clear standards, I think we set ourselves up to really have problems getting any of them through. And I worry about that, because obviously we want to see development. We have needs for this infrastructure. So I guess I don't have suggestions here this evening, but that would be my desire would be, what exactly are we talking about? There are visual impacts. Almost anybody is going to be impacted to some degree by towers. Certainly there are some corridors that are probably better, than others. But again, I guess that would be my appeal to you is, can we find some specific guidance so that when these things don't come, when they come to us or whoever else is sitting in these chairs, and we get, 20 people that stand up and say, my property is going to be devalued, I won't have a clear view of the mountains anymore, and all you have on the other side is a utility saying we need it, how do we interpret that? So, I'd leave it at
that's
that.
fair. I think, and I don't have it tonight, but there is a second level. There's another tier which didn't come into applicability tonight. I asked Mr. Weaver's department to sort of analyze whether or not that next level. So there is already something in there, and I had intentions that ultimately or automatically that extra level of conditions to be met, as you know, the familiarity with those. I had intentions that would be another level. So there is already another level of benchmarking in there, but I've been where you have, and it's very startling. We had that up and down the Glen, same problem, and I want to not have that without a discussion, at least, or better design, and then it would force, I'm fully aware that it's going to force the discussion at a level that's probably a little bit frustrating to those that have to deal with the power poles in the back corridor of already on a easement, but the idea that perhaps you force the undergrounding discussion or a location of a transformer in a more safe area or put up a light pole as you deal with these conditions of use. And that's a great tool. You started to go down that road tonight by helping a solution. And I think as we see the process work, it isn't to burden you, but the idea that we engage the public communication is helpful. And then that comes with the requirement to deal with community council input and presentations by petitioners.
Let's just not box ourselves in that we're at the whim of a couple of people that don't want to see something, and suddenly we can't move forward. So
fair enough.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Yeah, I'm greatly concerned. I understand tonight's issue, and I accept tonight's issue, but your language does not. Your language creates far more difficulty than it does solve. An electric transformer station could be a simple pad-mounted transformer that occurs thousands of times across this community. You haven't defined that down to a size. A gas regulator station, I've seen around the community smaller than 3 of these chairs. And we've got to talk about the size of these facilities, not just the facility. Today's telephone exchanges are 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot.
Mm-hmm.
And yet by putting this wording in here, I'm going to guess that it takes 90 days to get all the garbage done and get before us and get a decision on a very short construction season. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's talk about these larger facilities, maybe an acre or more, might be a defining point. And I understand that maybe adjacent to my lot is a sewage pump station. So I know, when these people talk about not in my backyard, I have a sewage pump station. You want to trade? And so I really want to get this clarified, because a water pump station may be a manhole in the street that nobody even knows is there.
To a degree, and my response to that would be, in particular, and you'll notice there's a slight nuance between the change in Table 5, which is the overall. That's the top one on page 3, and the bottom one is more specific to the Chugach Eagle River area under Table 10, which is the nuance. It's one code versus the other. So I'm slightly more prescriptive in the tower and the high tower voltage discussion in my area, if you want to call it my area. But I also would respond to you that oftentimes you're seeing those improvements because it's new development, and associated with the new development is that they have to take down all the trees that were traditionally in the back of that person's house forever and trench a new line to get that transformer in. And so that's sort of the discussion. I'm full aware of how small these things can be, or the less impactful items for sure. But the problem that I face, and when I go to these community councils and hear the verbiage, is they just cut down all the trees. Well, they had to put a sewer line through an easement that's been there for 30 years. It was their right. Could they have gone down the middle of the street because we're going to rip up next week? There's a lot of discussion, I believe, that's valuable to the process. Certainly not burdensome. I'm not a big regulation guy. I was hesitant to do it, but...
What I would suggest is a work session, because I agree in principle, but the language that is here now would be terribly problematic for the construction industry. And it just, let's figure out a win-win here. And yes, we don't have to clear a 30-foot easement unless we're AWU along Minnesota there right now.
You bet.
You can get by with narrower easements for your clearing.
Yeah, and I looked away because Mr. Potter, who's active in this process a lot, gave me an idea that it also, and I agree that I don't move quickly enough to that. I'd like to not be considered that I do things recklessly. So, his idea was also that we address sort of the site selection of larger utility substations. Chugach has that requirement. We do it for schools and other infrastructure. So you're correct in that regard, but it's sort of one bite at a time for what I was trying to accomplish under that requirement.
I'm really concerned that you don't have a size here and it could be misapplied.
And we really have to discuss, as you do, and I concur with you to a degree, of where the definitions may be limited, and without getting back into the debate of Title 21, you also have to go to the definitions page on where they are, because there's multiple levels of that as well. So the idea that the discussion and the dialogue happen, absolutely.
But I'm confused here, Jim. The way I read this paragraph 3, which starts out utility substation, that's what's in the new code. Those definitions are there. That's not something Bill's proposing.
Right. That's what's
already there. That error has already been made.
The problem, but see, before they are right now,
we didn't define them before. I'll just interrupt you. There was no definition really before in code.
Yeah, but it was an administrative site plan review.
Not in residential. We never did it.
Okay, I got to look at that. But
Yeah, and that's why, again, it's a tough debate to do at 10:30 at night, but, and it isn't my purpose to debate, it's to dialogue and interface. The work you've brought to us, hugely complimentary. I'm fairly focused on the task at hand and haven't done a good job of saying...
I got a lot more in the queue.
I'm good to go with it, but the compliments are there. It's a work in process, but we're facing with some things that we might not have clearly discussed.
Commissioner Dean.
I have a friend in town. Her name is Ellen Green. She's a professional engineer, and she has designed utility easements in this state for about 4 decades. John Spring knows her. She is a really good person for understanding utilities, and she will tell you right now, today, that you cannot underground high
agree.
lines, and they have to be above ground. Right now in California, to put new high voltage transmission lines in towers, it takes about 10 years to go through the permitting process. I don't want to be California.
I don't either.
It's scary. We could make ourselves just so pigeonholed where we can't grow. And we need to have infrastructure, and we just so lack it in this state, especially energy.
I believe you're right. I think the issues are that I've seen the discussions, and Ms. Yosemir can know this, where the utility will show up and you got a beautiful mountainscape and they're going to put your transformers on the power pole instead of a ground mount transformer. So you're looking at these Christmas tree tubs up in the poles. So there's an example of that, is where does that discussion occur that we tell that utility to say, hey, put that transformer on the ground for that street light system that's going in. So those are the nuances that I see in my community as we develop. And trust me, I'm very cognizant of the need to accelerate growth and be less burdensome. I'm all over it. But some of these, as you saw the neighborhood erupt, would be that in the illustration of the high poles that showed up on Northern Lights. We're heading that way in Chugiak Eagle River, and I want to get proactive.
There's no way to underground it.
No, I wouldn't say
that's the problem that I've got with your statements. You keep saying that underground it, and it's not possible. And what I'm saying is that it has to go somewhere. Along Tudor Road, I'm sorry, it was a logical place. It's a wide spot alongside
I may have focused on the undergrounding example too much. That's not what this is about necessarily. It's to have the broader-based discussion about the design and the location and the placement. That's what that really requires. At this level, not at that level or not as a permitted use. And that's the nuance I'm trying to say is, can it just automatically happen? Is it allowable use because I own that property? I could sell it to MEA and they could start tomorrow. That's the nuance I'm trying to deliver to you, is that it's in some cases a permitted use, sometimes a use discussed over there only. I want to bring the discussion here. That's what I want to do. Not just for undergrounding, but for all of it. And that's as it relates to substations. So you're free to, do it. I'll massage it and half bake it, or we'll make it specific to Chapter 10 and try to move it that way too, which was my first idea, and I'm happy to have guidance.
Commissioner Spring.
Yeah.
Oh, you were done, Stacy? Okay. Okay. John?
Just a couple quick comments. I agree with the ordinance and intention to make a conditional use. I think it makes a lot of difference in the quality of the development. We didn't succeed tonight exactly, but in a lot of cases, I think when there's a public hearing, then there's a negotiation that occurs and it becomes a benefit for the entire community as well as people who live around it. I think it's a very useful amendment. I wonder why, though, the high voltage transmission towers aren't also required to be conditional uses in Anchorage or the Bowl area. Why just Chugiak Eagle River? Is that how? Am I reading that right?
Well, I'm okay with it, partly because I think what I'm trying to do is be proactive. I went down that speech a little earlier, trying to be ahead of it a little bit more. And my feeling is that the discussions are going to be more redevelopment in Anchorage than they are growth modeling. I think where I see the development is raw land, raw plates. Where do we mow down the trees? Where do we go with this? That's a much more concerning element for Chugiak Eagle River. Mr. Weaver can probably weigh in as well, that it may not be also required somewhere else in code. I'm not displeased oftentimes with the administrative review. It does urge that process along to get the developer to the table that season. But in some cases, trying to be proactive to it and bring the community together for better ideas, I think does work.
Well, you did mention the Northern Lights issue, and that obviously was some type of redevelopment or a new connection that was needed.
Sure.
It might still be. There's some growth that's going to happen in the Bowl area, too, that probably requires some new transmission lines,
Likely.
I think. But and one last question. I want to just reinforce what Commissioner Robinson said about conditional use standards. I think I was struggling with this case
That's
tonight,
right.
primarily because I didn't have any other thing. I had to use the general conditional use standards, and I found them somewhat lacking. Something would help, additional standards would really help me, this commission, I think, make those conditional use decisions, particularly something regarding the need for it or the alternatives that might be possible. We weren't even really, I didn't feel comfortable even asking them about alternatives because that wasn't part of our purview, I don't think. When there is no other choice, and we basically, I think the community or the neighbors are going to have to eat it when it comes to whether or not we're going to have the 70-foot tower next to their property. If there's no alternative, and we can convince them that there's no alternative, that makes our decision-making a lot easier.
Yeah, duly noted, and I think that's where Mr. Potter was going with, when I've talked with him at length on some of the discussion points, and that's where perhaps the site selection modeling would go, but that was quite a bit more regulation and burdensome to the developer than I wanted to go down. But to answer your point, Mr. Weaver, you understand what I'm talking about, that secondary standard level for high tower transmission lines is already in code. Did it retain in the new rewrite? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Starr, Assemblymember Starr, it is in the new code, and the reason 70 feet is in the current code as allowed by right, it's really dictated by the national standards for safety. So that's why 70 feet is permitted by right. The voltages and those lines require that height. So that's why anything more than that was conditional use. And if you put it into a conditional use, then you're going to go through this whole iteration of how can you mitigate that height with any additional requirements. There are 3 basic requirements in there now for high voltage transmission facilities, and it's basically landscaping, which really, doesn't really obscure any of those facilities. It just kind of mitigates it to some degree. But 70 feet is a minimum national standard.
That's fair, and I don't mind the height, but it's more my observation, and not to debate Mr. Weaver, but was where do they go and when do they go in, and where the public gets to weigh in on that. And so that was part of the motivation to be that proactive nature where it goes. I surely will take under discussion that need element, how you identify that need, and then you've always got that build for the future mentality that always arises too. So anyhow, fair action. I think the idea is to engage. Your products that come out of here are great. Sometimes we overrule them and sometimes we change them, but they really help.
Commissioner Barker.
Well, not to belabor the point, but I would encourage you to look at bifurcating this. Obviously, in the face of advancing technology, we have things like we had tonight, where the simple scale and intensity of a use, because of its need to support new technologies, outstrips what we had considered earlier to be an acceptable use in a residential neighborhood. So I think on the one hand, we also have with advancing technologies, things that were just cited earlier, telephone exchanges the size of a pocketbook. What a waste of time and energy to bring it to the conditional use process. I think we definitely have to have standards, and it's going to take a lot more work to get us to that point, but ultimately would serve the community better on both hands. We really consider what is the intensity and the impact of the use. And those are the things that maybe we need to be looking more closely at.
And that's a fair observation. I think the link in those that have worked the Title 21, you affect this chapter and it affects that chapter, and then it moves over into this code. So the idea that it could be modified, absolutely, I've already indicated the need to sort of accelerate the control mechanisms, if you want to call them, for the development in the Chugiak Eagle River area through Chapter 10, and I anticipate doing that. I think the way it's written in terms of the proposal that we already have a motion on our floor, which was remanded back to here. So I believe that it's actually in 2 pieces now. So it would be one section, another section to be approved. So ideally, it could, could be changed.
I appreciate the Assembly's efforts to make sure it did come back through us. I don't have any strong objections to the Assembly continuing to work this come up with. I just urge you to take a look and be prepared to discuss at the Assembly cost and time.
Yeah, and it's hard to know where you need to go with this stuff. I wasn't particularly pleased that MEA brought the discussion the way they did, so trying to get that process to work is the bigger motivation, and I'm not certain that elements like this really do that. I think it's more partnering and communicating. Okay. Thanks for your efforts tonight.
Thanks. I don't see any further questions, so is there anyone else want to testify? Anyone else? Anyone else at all? Last chance. We can give you 3 minutes. Anything? I don't see any further public testimony, so public testimony is closed. What is the wish of the body? I have a motion, Mr. Ferguson.
I was going to make a motion that we table this until we have the opportunity to have a work session with the author and staff and come up with a solution.
Motion to table. I have a second. A motion to table with... I have a second, Commissioner Barker, I'm sorry. I have a motion to table until after we have a work session. Commissioner Ferguson, want to talk to your motion?
No, I just think it's obviously something we need to do, and let's get it done.
Okay, any further discussion? Anyone else discussion? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think our discussion has been pretty thorough and complete, and I hate to think that every time we have a revision to an issue in Title 21, that we're going to have a work session. Because I think we're going to be faced with a lot of these amendments and changes to Title 21. So I'm prepared to vote.
All right, so let's use the machines on the motion to table. You're not going to make me count, are you? Oh, you're going to make me count. What are we doing? That's 4-4, so that means it fails, right? It has to be 5?
Yeah.
Majority?
Yeah.
So motion to table fails. So now I need, can I have another motion, please? Yes, Commissioner Yoshimura.
I move to approve the motion as written. As a recommendation
I have a motion
to the
on the
Assembly.
floor to forward it back to the Assembly with our recommendation to do their due diligence and consideration. All right, do we have a second? Can I second? I have a second. Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Yoshimura, care to speak to your motion?
No, I think we've pretty well discussed it, and I am supportive of conditional uses coming to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't believe our burden is, caseload is such that we need to forego our responsibilities and obligations.
Commissioner Spring, you want to comment on your second? You were the second, correct? She cleared you already. Any comments?
So, yeah, I was second. Let me get this straight, I guess. This is an ordinance that's going to the Assembly for approval, but there'll be some amendments to it.
They sent it to us for our input.
And my understanding would be that if there's amendments, then we would get the revised edition. If they're significant,
That would be their choice. They could send it back to us with significant changes or just pass it. Correct, Mr. Stein?
All amendments to Title 21 return to the Commission for recommendation back to the Assembly.
And, well, in this case, it's an ordinance that is going to be on the table at the Assembly. The version we looked at will probably be changed, and if that version's changed significantly, would it not come back to us? Or
That'll be the Assembly's decision whether to send it back to us for review or to just pass it, correct?
Yeah.
Or we could have a work session as well. There's a lot of options.
You can invite me or invite us. You got my email.
Well, I guess I would approve the motion if, given the understanding that we'll see the revised edition.
I'm not sure we can have that.
I would request that if there's a revision.
Kind of trust the Assembly will do the right thing. I don't know we can put condition on it. We can put that in the resolution that we would urge them, if it changes significantly, come back to us. Okay? Any other comments?
My comment is I'm not concerned about the work for this commission. I'm concerned about the work for the applicants. That is where I really feel that we have to work this to, because, we're the tip of the iceberg, and I'm concerned about that work, and that's the reason why I think we need a work session on it.
Yeah, that's what I agree with. My concern would be for the petitioner to not just the cost of the permit or the process, but the overall cost of preparing it. So let's vote.
Well, we saw, Commissioner Ferguson, we saw tonight when the applicant didn't do their work.
Let's vote.
All right.
All right, so Mr. Assemblyman Stein, looks like the ball's in your court. Please, you're heard. We're trusting you to handle this well.
Yep.
And if it changes significantly, to please urge them to send it back to us. Thank you, sir. All right, that's it. I did have one comment in the new business category. At a previous session, we had a work session, or at least a presentation on the design criteria manual. I think that's coming up next week, is the design criteria manual. I spoke with some woman, Johnston. She is the sponsor of that action to send it to us, et cetera, and to move the process. And she made it clear that the Assembly's intent, the majority of Assembly's intent is for us to work that document, not to do the public hearing, but also for us to do a thorough review and to give input. So she does not think she does not see a time constraint on us. Do it, work it, have work sessions. So we will discuss that next week, but just want to give you a heads up. That's the feedback from the Assembly, that we do not have to close that case next Monday if we don't want to, if we want to do further. So be prepared to discuss that. Any other comments from someone, John, Stacy, Connie?
Well, one thing that we could do with the design criteria manual is establish a subcommittee like we did for Title 21 or parts of Title 21.
Yeah, so we do the public hearing and then
yeah.
close public hearing. Then we may have to have another public hearing depending on
Yeah,
what
or
we
keep
change.
the public hearing open.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Postpone, yeah, what do you,
Yeah.
you suspend it, whatever the correct term is? Lori will help me out. Any comments down there, Mitchie? Welcome. Great job tonight. Tyler, anything?
No, just that I think we have a short board next Monday.
It sounds like it. You're going to have some fun next Monday. Greg? Not next Monday, it's February 2nd is the short one. Do we have a short one next week?
What about next Monday?
Who's not here?
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
There is a short board next Monday. There will only be 5 members present.
Okay.
South High School will have to be postponed because some of the members who are present were not present in January when it was first heard. This is a continuation of a case from last January. We will be sending an email to the new members requesting that you do listen to the tape, but you'll have more than a week to do that. I believe the 2 other substantive cases will also be postponed, so I think the DCM will be the only thing on the agenda for next Monday.
I thought you said you were going to schedule the South Anchorage for when I wasn't here. So that would be February 2nd. That would be a good deal.
And both Peter and I will be gone as well that month.
So you may have you're going to have a short board then, probably, huh?
I'd also like to remind you that we do have a director's meet lunch on Thursday.
Thank you.
And it will be at the permit center because the library room was unavailable.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I was meant to mention that. All right, after Tyler, Greg, Jim, motion to adjourn? Yeah. Second. Thank you. Thanks. Great work.